Hello? Okay.
Good evening, everybody. This is the 7 April meeting of the Finance Committee, and with us we have just about all the Finance Committee committee members, as well as I think I saw Select Board member Mr. Germain on, and several others. So thank you, everybody, for participating and joining in. We're going to get right to the agenda. And first up on the agenda is Mr. Weiss and Mr. Wiggin regarding the pilot agreement.
Jerry, do you want to introduce it? Or I can.
I was just going to say, the pilot agreement's what's on here. So why don't I defer to you?
Okay.
And then if there are any additional questions regarding the PPA or the lease agreement, I can touch on those and where we are.
All right. And I'm glad Carol's here. Yeah, Mr. Chairman, we've had a proposal from Select Energy to install solar panels on the Clyde Braun Elementary School. This is the company that also gave us solar panels on the library. And I think I figured out the savings with this. It's about, let me see, they said about 19, I think it's about $15,000 a year in energy costs. We're talking 256,000 kilowatt hours each year. So the assessor took a very thorough process to figure out that the value, looking at the value of the equipment up there, and talked to a number of other municipalities that have solar, and as a pilot agreement. It will be for 20 years. It's a pilot agreement, $6,784 every year for the next 20 years. It's a level cost, so same each year.
Could you say that figure one more time?
$6,784.
Thank you.
And I think the only thing I would jump in to add is that's based on the current equipment. The entire roof capability, I guess I'll call it, is not currently being used. So if the solar were ever to be expanded, then I assume a new pilot agreement or a addendum to that pilot agreement would need to be negotiated for the additional equipment.
What percentage of the roof space is this current? What percent of the roof is this?
50-ish%. Yeah, about 50%.
Okay.
Apologize for being late.
Okay, Mr. Weiss, keep going. Thank you, Joyce.
Okay, well, that's pretty much it. I don't know what sort of information you would like. We looked at when we looked at this, we compared the cost of generating 256,000 kilowatt hours, which will be more than, I think we figured it'd be more than that school will need, but we'll be able to take whatever excess there is and share that with probably the high school, other accounts in town.
Yep.
We're looking at 6 cents per kilowatt hour for the cost of the solar, where right now we're paying more or less 18 cents per hour, per kilowatt hour rather. So it's a significant savings.
I guess I'll start off with some of the questions that I have, and then I'll invite whomever else may want to comment in. As I remember, this was somewhat anticipated, or, for lack of a better word, forecasted when the school was designed, that this was a possibility. So there's no major feats of engineering required to get the equipment on the roof and get the energy to, lack of a better word, the grid.
No, and as a matter of fact, I think nowadays it's the way they attach the panels, it's evolved. So with a this type of roof, they don't even do penetrations. So that was one of the big concerns we had, and we worked through that with Select, is that we wanted to make sure that with a brand new standing seam roof, which is a little unique, that we had somebody who was experienced in dealing with that, because we certainly didn't want to void a brand new warranty. And that's one of many issues that has been worked out.
What about electrical gear, whether it be switches or converters or whatever gets the power to the grid? Is there space for that, or is that additional space that will be taken from the existing grounds?
Well, actually, when the electrical room was designed, albeit it may have been designed improperly according to code, there was actually space not only for any additional electrical that would needed to be there, but also conceivably for battery space. Now, we're not doing batteries with this installation, and there's a lot of controversy as to whether or not we'll ever do batteries, but the capacity is there to handle the equipment.
Okay. All right. And then Mr. Weiss, I assume, could you give us your professional recommendation?
Sure. After seeing the results of solar, which is already we installed on the high school in 2014, and from the library, and having worked with this company in the past, I recommend that we certainly move ahead with the project. And as far as the pilot, which is the subject of concern, is concerned, I'm the energy manager, so I guess I would yield to Ms. Johnston for that. But I would certainly recommend going ahead with this.
Okay. Well, it's fairly common these days, right? It's more and more common to take the opportunity of the roof space and put panels on top of the roof and add to the grid, right?
It is. And one of the advantages that we have, because we're a municipality, is we don't own them. So it's not our responsibility to take care of them when they go down. We had a problem with that at the high school, and we called out the owners of the panels, and they came out very fast, because if there's something goes wrong with the panels themselves, it is the owners of the panel who suffer the losses, and not us. We will have a guaranteed minimum production built into the PPA.
So
the PPA being the power purchase agreement.
And so does that include lease of the space on top of the roof, or is it just basically sell back for the 6 cents?
Well, there's two documents. One is the power purchase agreement, which Bob just referred to,
Yep.
and separately there's a lease agreement, which actually leases the roof, to the vendor, in this case Select, for the purposes of installing the solar panels.
Okay, thank you. And if it seems like I'm unprepared, I'm not nearly as prepared. I didn't read through the document, so I appreciate you bearing with me.
No problem.
Okay, with that, is there anybody else that would like to make comment or add questions to the discussion?
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead, Jim.
Robert, is the savings of 15,000, does that include the cost of the actual the panel, I think?
Yeah, that's all inclusive.
Yeah.
Well, for the you quoted the energy savings as being 15,000, but it's going to cost us 6,600 or so per month in order to that's per month, right? 6,600.
67,884. That is actually what the owners of the panel, Select Energy, will be paying us every year.
That's
It's payment in lieu of real estate taxes. We rather than taxing them every year on their personal property, it's developed over, the equipment's going to be approximately $440,000 when it's installed. And so we did an analysis over a 20-year period of what they pay the town in taxes. So over 20 years, they'll pay $135,680 in payments to the town instead of personal property tax. It's actually just prepayment of personal property tax over a flat line, 20 years.
So we're giving up revenue in that respect. So I look at it as cost regardless. So we may be
We're not
saving
giving-
15,
we're not
but
giving
it's
revenue on
costing
that.
us 6.
We're not giving up any revenue.
Yeah, that's our revenue coming in. A payment in lieu of taxes is where instead of paying the personal property taxes on $400,000 the first year and have it dramatically decline over 20 years, they like to negotiate out a flat fee to keep their costs stable over the 20-year life of the panels. But they'd have to pay personal property taxes on that equipment being installed on our roof. So they're going to pay us $6,700 a year in personal property taxes, plus give us electricity at a savings of $15,000 per year. So we're basically contracting, if I'm correct, buying the electricity off of them at 6 cents a kilowatt hour. Is that what you said?
6.1, I think it is.
6.1 is instead of buying it off the grid at the number you use.
Yeah, about
18.
18, about 18.
So we have that real savings right there. And then we get the extra kicker of the property tax revenue coming in of $6,800 a year. These things are usually pretty good deals all the way around for everybody involved. And the reason the owner wants to do it over 20 years is obviously just to stabilize his cash flow. He doesn't want to have to be paying out a huge chunk the first year when the equipment's brand new, and then diminishing amounts like your auto excise tax. As my son's 2005 car is taxed at, I believe, the absolute legal minimum. But they're doing the same amount each year across the board for 20 years. So
Weiss? Could you, this is probably irrelevant, but what happens at the end of the 20-year agreement? They remove their panels or we renew?
Well, I think we have multiple options. We can buy them, though it's unlikely we would want to. In all likelihood, what we would do is we would probably look for a successor agreement, in which case part of that successor agreement would be just like when you renew a copier lease, you look for new panels, you look for the state-of-the-art technology at the time. And essentially it's a matter of negotiating a new pilot, negotiating a new PPA, negotiating a new lease. But essentially, I suppose the copier analogy isn't the best one in the world, but it isn't a whole lot different. It's just the contract is a bit more convoluted.
Okay. And Terry, thank you. Who else have you presented this to?
The PPA and the lease?
Yes.
So basically, I'm still in the process of final negotiations, but our school committee has seen it. They've been regularly updated, and there are certain terms and conditions that they were insistent on. We, in turn, our attorney and myself have insisted on them with Select. There are certain kind of drop dead conditions, you know, and, you know, so far, you know, on a couple of them, there's been some gentle pushback, and we have pushed back again. And, you know, I think we're coming to agreement on those.
Okay. Actually, that last point that you made is kind of why I'm asking. I'm just curious as to if there's any dissension or you know, kind of pushback on this proposal. Where has it been? What haven't we asked that?
Well,
I think isn't.
I think there's three main points of contention, and then there's some minor contractual language, which I think we've more or less worked out. But I think the main pieces of contention that, and one in particular, we wanted some form of bonding or protection for the town and the school during the installation process. We felt that was very important. Solek pushed back on that, and we said, you know, quite frankly, we're not going to have an installation of this nature without some kind of protection for the town of Millis. Granted, Solek has an excellent reputation. They have a long track history, but honestly, that doesn't really matter. It's a standard practice, and we're not going to abandon standard practice on that. The two other issues that we were insistent upon is that while Solek is a DCAM manufacturer, not. Likewise, while prevailing wage at this moment in time does not apply, the legislature can always do what the legislature decides to do. And so what we insisted upon was language that said that to the extent that the subcontractors needed to be DCAM certified, that would happen. To the extent that prevailing wage was going to apply, that needed to happen. We felt that that was, very simple language, because if prevailing wage doesn't apply, then they don't need to use it on this project. If the subcontractors don't need to be DCAM certified, that's fine. The language still allows for that. But we felt that that was very important. And those were probably the three major issues that, we were working with. And I think we've finally resolved that in our favor.
Okay. And please define DCAM.
Oh, Lord, I knew you were going to ask me to do
You
that.
used it.
I know,
used
I
it.
did, and I was going to look up the initials before I came.
All right, I'll look
So
it up.
if
The
you-
Division of Capital Asset Management and Maintenance.
Thank you very much.
There you
You're
go.
welcome. All
Thank you
right,
very much.
cool.
But you're probably familiar with it with the Clyde Brown School, in that every contractor that was involved with the Clyde Brown School had to be DCAM certified. And what that does is it does a couple of different things. First off, these folks have been through a rigorous process of licensing, but also review. So every single person that worked, every single contractor that worked on the Clyde Brown School, for example, we gave an evaluation to, and some of them, it was not pretty. Okay, some of them got very negative evaluations. So that all feeds into whether or not a DCAM certification is continued for a vendor. And that's why it's important that if it's required for a project, you ask for it. So as I say, Solect, which will be the, if you will, the general contractor, is DCAM certified. But we wanted that available to us for the subcontractors if state law required it. It does not currently. Whether or not there'll be a change in state law, who knows? But we did not want to be blocked out of having that if it was required.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Joyce.
Thank you. And it might be directed more to Rob because you're the energy person. But was there any time that discussed with solar panels being put on some of our open space, or possibly being put on the land that we're talking about possibly purchasing, rather than, so that it could help the whole town rather than just the school?
No, we never had that discussion.
Is that something that could be open to is that something that we could talk about? Because why not benefit the whole town and use some land that we already have of open spaces and do solar that way?
Yeah, that's always a possibility out there. In fact, I think you're going to hear about a large scale ground mount solar photovoltaic amendment, and just after this issue. So that's always a possibility.
I would add, I can't speak to obviously property that or land that you would put a solar farm on. It's not my purview, but again, the original plan here was, and still is, frankly, that the excess, and if there is excess power from the school, that, for example, the VMB building would conceivably be a beneficiary of that power. So yes, it's primarily for the school, and yes, it probably will, at least initially, primarily be for the school at the current install. But certainly if down the road we were to expand that installation, clearly we would be looking at, having excess solar power for other municipal buildings.
I think I would just take a minute to clarify that if the school's electrical bill goes down, that the school's budget goes down, and that revenue would be essentially, back to the town as a whole to decide where those savings or cost avoidance gets applied. And if I'm wrong, I would ask that Carol or somebody, go ahead and comment.
I don't know that the school budget would go down necessarily, but the $6,800 on the pilot definitely goes into the general fund.
Yes.
That's benefiting the whole town, not going
But
to the
just so everybody's clear, the money going into the general fund is what funds all of the school in town. So it's not as if that money is just appropriated just for municipal. I mean, it goes into local receipts, right? So, so that's something. As far as reducing the electricity line at the school, I mean, the school has their budget, right? And the town has their budget. So if we have cost savings in one area, we would more than likely use it in another area. Don't know whether or not the school had intended to do the same thing, but I don't think.
Terry, please comment on that. If the school's electrical budget, and we're not talking a lot of money. I mean, it's not $15,000 a month. It's $15,000 a year. But if the school's electrical bill goes down $15,000 a year, it's not like the school unilaterally gets to decide where that money goes. It goes back into the general.
I disagree with it. The library's electrical bill we didn't reduce the library budget when they put it on their roof. These are decisions that the library and the school have made, and if we can put it on the police building as well, and there's savings incurred, I would think that goes to the department that has it. That has the ability. I think that obviously the pilot agreement always goes into the general fund, but I think that the savings, I don't know that we split the difference. We split those out as much. We haven't with the library. We won't do it with the police, which is another building that we built with the idea of solar in mind. I mean, all these buildings were designed to accommodate solar. They just weren't put in at the time of construction because you don't want to put solar in at that point. You want to wait till the modern technology. But
I
I
might.
might,
Well, let me. I have the floor.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yes, you may. Yes, you may. Go ahead. And then I'm going to jump in.
Okay. First off, I want to say we do try to play together when we can. I would use maybe slightly different terms. I would say that it would help stabilize our budget.
Sure.
So yes, so the energy costs are savings. Obviously, there are other things that still conceivably grow. We have collective bargaining agreements, of course, that we continue to need to fund. I think we mentioned in our budget presentation that we haven't increased our supply lines for at least 4 years now. So there's those types of things that, we absorb somewhere. And when we can achieve savings in one area, that's where we obviously try to make up for those things in those other areas.
Mr. Chair?
Well, hold on, Joyce. So my asking the question was certainly not the intent to have a debate on the particular issue of where the savings go, more just to understand. And I understand the different viewpoints. I just don't think it's necessarily germane to have the discussion further or debate on it. I think we understand that it's in the town's best interest in general that if there's a savings to a budget, that's a good thing. And I'm happy to leave it at that. But Joyce, go ahead.
My only concern is that we're, once again, I think it's admirable. I think it's great that you want to save money for the school, for the town, for the expenses. But once again, I feel like we're separating a state and, it's almost like the town people and the school, the municipality and the school. And I guess I really wish that we would do something more collaboratively so all could gain. And I won't go for, I'll let it be, but that's just my 21 cents.
Okay. Any more comments for Bob and Terry?
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Jody.
So as I look at the purchase power agreement, it looks like You aren't going to know what the energy prices are until the kind of contract is signed and you hear back from the Massachusetts Department of Energy Resources. Has there been, to your knowledge, a lot of fluctuation in the pricing from kind of when these agreements are signed as to, and when they're actually put into place? It looks like you don't have a final PPA rate there or a maximum rate as part of the contract yet.
Well, the price fluctuation through DOER is based on the blocks system where, which is very convoluted, but as long as we stay within the block that we're in, the prices will stay very stable.
And has Solict given you an indication of how full the current block is at this point?
The block, they have already reserved the space in the block.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and they tell us 6.1, it will be 6.1 in the final. If you're looking at the PPA that came with the packet,
Mhm.
I think that was I don't know, Terry, if you saw that, it looked like a very early version of the PPA and was a real red marked up version of it.
No, well, actually, that's the latest one we've been working with.
Is it?
Yeah, which is probably why it's so marked up because
Yeah.
but that's the latest one we've been working with.
Well, I have some experience with this, and I know how marked up they get and the block system, and it is complicated. And I think folks who haven't had to actually try to deal with this don't really understand that you don't know your rate until you're kind of locked in. But I haven't paid attention to the blocks in this year. The one that I worked on is a little older, so I wasn't sure about the fluctuation between the different blocks at this point for Massachusetts.
And I haven't worked on, this is my first one in Massachusetts. I've worked on them in New Hampshire and Vermont. But that, again, different states, and it works differently.
And the incentives are always changing too.
Yes.
So as I understand it, it's the school will be leasing their roof to Solict, who will put on the panels, and then the town will be buying the energy that those panels produce at a reduced rate from what it would have been buying. And in exchange for Solict putting the panels on the roof of the school, we'll enter into the pilot agreement, which will basically even out the taxes, if you will, that we get, even though it's not really taxes, it's a payment in lieu of taxes. Even that out over 20 years, so it's the same amount every year that we get over 20 years instead of a big chunk all at once and then diminishing.
Yeah.
Is that a correct summary of basically what this project would be?
Pretty good, I think.
Yeah, very good.
Okay.
You can get a recording of that if I could.
Yeah.
It is being recorded.
I have to do this at town meeting, so I have this article, so I need to be
Yep.
able to explain it
No,
and
think,
be
I
correct.
think you've got it.
Okay.
I've got another question. Go ahead. Sorry, Jody.
No, that's okay.
ahead,
No,
go ahead.
I just wanted to say I think this is a good deal for the town of Millis. It's what we had kind of discussed when we were building the school, that this was likely to be coming down the pike, and I appreciate all the work that folks have put into it, because these deals aren't as simple as one might think.
Bob and Terry, is there the potential for unintended consequences here in terms of our existing electricity provider, power provider, in the sense that if we take those kilowatt hours and put them on to solar, and then solar is unavailable and we jump on in the winter during a high usage, do our rates for off the grid traditional power have the potential to be greater, to be higher? In other words, what's the net effect?
Well, I'm trying to think of our supply, and we have really three supplies of electricity. One in this case would be the solar. We also have an agreement with a net metered solar farm that's in Carter that supplies most of the energy right now for the school. That is, we have a contract there that it will all, that the cost will always be 15% lower than what we would have paid through Eversource. So it's a pretty good guarantee. Well, I was going to compare it to the demand rate, but it's probably not a good way to guarantee it. But we're in pretty good shape. We're in much better shape now with the different guarantees. We have so that, and we can switch around that supply of energy from the net metered energy if we wish every couple of months. So it's really, I don't see a downside if something like that happens.
Okay,
And
thank you.
The other part, of course, the other part of the cost from Eversource is the delivery cost, and that pretty much stays the same throughout the year.
I'm just going to offer up a clarification. Maybe this is irrelevant. Everybody understands it, but pilot, when we say pilot program, we're not talking like a new program or something experimental. We're talking about payment in lieu of taxes, which is a good thing, but it's kind of an unfortunate acronym in that it implies maybe more risk. That's a connotation with a pilot program. So anyway, just to offer that up, Kathy McGinnis, please.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, could I just mention to Mr. Wiggin that I hope the school committee does encourage bonding protection in case of damage, dissolution. I hope that's something that they won't give up, Terry.
That's a hard line.
Oh, good to
We will
know.
not
Thank
give
you.
that up.
Okay. And also, if Mr. Weiss could explain to me why not prevailing wage? Is it for solar reasons, or this is new to me?
Actually, that would be a Mr. Wiggin.
Yeah, it's one. I think it is a combination of size of project, type of project, and there are exclusions in particular for solar projects, and I believe that's why.
Yeah.
Thank you. Wish that would be more. Appreciate it, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. And I'm sorry, one last final question from me. Why not the whole building or more than 50%?
I'll be honest with you. I think this was the project that had always been proposed, and I think that it was. I'm speculating here because I kind of came in. I came in and did the building, but I really wasn't involved with sort of the initial thoughts on how that solar project would be proposed. And I think it was the thought process is they wanted to do that 50% of the building and get that established and see how that worked. That's maybe a bad choice of words.
It is.
But I honestly don't know why they didn't go for the full extent of the farm they could put on. But this was the
That's fine.
proposal. Yeah.
I can add to that, and that is when they came to us, they wanted to do 440,000 kilowatt hours. We are already, we have a number of contracts to energy suppliers, and that was the first reason. We weren't sure how that would affect our total. We don't want to be overproducing electricity. The other part was when they came to me, we had about 3 months of energy use that the school had had, and then it was COVID came in and the school shut down. So you want to do this based on your need, and we really don't know what the need of the school is going to be. We've got a much better idea now. I went through an awful lot of spreadsheets trying to figure out what we are going to need. And I said, come back later on if we need more. But at this point, you want to size it really to the use of the building.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that we have to remind people. We have yet to have a full year in the building.
I understand. Okay. just curious, and if some is good, more is better. Maybe that's not always the case, and if this is a good deal, then why not maximize the potential? But I do understand the answer, and I appreciate your being candid with it. Last call for any questions. We're going to move on and try to get us back on agenda. Mr. Weiss and Mr. Wiggins, thank you very much. Wiggin,
Okay,
sorry, I
thank you.
keep adding an S.
That's okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody.
You're welcome. Thank you. Okay, we're going to pass this over to Ms. Riley regarding zoning bylaw amendment, cannabis delivery.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This bylaw comes as a result of the CCC's approval of both home delivery and social consumption in marijuana as of last September. So the town had specifically made the determination previously that we would not be allowing social consumption, but because we have retail sales establishments in the town of Millis, we must allow delivery licensed businesses. So where the bylaw had originally stated, referenced marijuana establishments pursuant to Chapter 940, Section 1, which is the state regulations that defines what marijuana establishments are. This amendment now defines which establishments we're allowing, which in effect is pretty much every marijuana establishment with the exception of social consumption establishments. So we will, again, we have to allow delivery licenses, which there are two kinds. There is the courier business and there is a delivery operator's business. The difference being that a delivery operator will go to a retailer, buy in bulk, relabel the packaging, and then sell it online and deliver it. Whereas a courier is similar to DoorDash. You would get online, the customer would get online, order the product from the delivery company, and then the courier would go pick it up and simply deliver it. In both of these instances, there is extensive licensing regulations. There's still the seed-to-seed tracking. All drivers are required to have GPS, body cams, the same security systems in place and licensed by the state, security provisions approved by the Millis Police Department. And they would be, for the delivery operators that would be buying in bulk, we would receive the same 3% sales tax that we do with the brick and mortar retailer, I should say, that we have in town. And just to clarify, this only applies to delivery companies, whether courier or operator, that look to establish their business out of the town of Millis. It does not apply to a courier that is located in another town and is simply making a delivery to a customer in the town of Millis. That's unfortunately something we have no control over. This is to include licensing and the zoning regulations for licensed delivery companies that look to have their home base in Millis.
Okay. I don't have any questions, so I'm going to defer to others that may have some. They do.
So I just question Peter.
Go ahead, Greg.
So since we do allow the retail, we have to allow this. That's the gist of it. We just need a law. It's one of those things where we need a zoning bylaw to address it, but we don't have the choice of not allowing it. Is that
correct?
I like to know when my hands are tied. Thank you. So
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Riley.
I'd like to ask Mrs. Riley a question. Do we have a limit?
Do it on your own time. Go ahead.
Is there a limit on the number of businesses that can be set up that are delivery business in town?
No, the state regulations only allow us to limit the brick and mortar retail sales establishments.
And a quick follow-up, can an existing brick and mortar retailer offer delivery services, or does the delivery service have to be set up as a separate entity?
No, they can obtain a license to become a delivery operator. They would have to go through the same licensing process that they go through to be a retailer. It's a very extensive licensing process. These businesses will most likely not be opening up for several months. I would suspect probably not. At earliest would be the end of this year, because this the law itself has just been approved, was just passed. However, the CCC has not begun setting up the license process. So the CCC has a lot of work to do before they will be issuing their first license. But unlike when we were thrown the retail licensing issue, we, at least this time, did have a little more time to jump ahead of it and get this law on our books, so that we're not frantic. Because again, without this amendment to our bylaw, they could establish anywhere. So you could, anywhere that within town, they could establish a delivery operator, a courier could run their business out of any place in town.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
sorry.
Kathy.
I'd just like to add to that the town could impose a moratorium. I think I heard town council say at one of the select board meetings, if it came to that. But this is a good article, and I assume, Ms. Nicole, that town council reviewed this. Makes sense to me. Thank you for doing this.
Actually, Ms. McGinnis, town council drafted this for us.
There we go. Yep.
I'll just take it down kind of continue the line of questioning that Doug had prompted some thoughts, and that is, Nicole, you'd mentioned that there's two types. There's a type that buys it in bulk and repackages it, and essentially resells it.
Yes.
Two questions. One, do we have any input as to which type of operation we allow into town?
No. We, again, as Ms. McGinnis said, we could put a moratorium that would be a temporary hold, but we cannot permanently prohibit either one of those businesses establishing a location, their base in Millis.
Does the first type, where they buy in bulk and potentially relabel and resell, are they allowed to store off premises? In other words, if they show up at ComCan and they buy a pound, are they then required to sell within so much amount of time, or are they then allowed to store it in their place of business with all of the security features and all of the other licensing requirements?
They will be able to store it within their facility, and so that's one of the reasons why it will be many months before this gets up and going, because the CCC will have to have their regulations for this business. But it would be similar, if not identical, to the storage regulations, the security regulations that are in place for retailers, for either actually medical or retail sales establishments. And all of their security. Go ahead.
It would be, but wouldn't it also then basically mean that we have more than one retailer in town?
Depending upon how you consider it, because they would not be able to sell out of that location, it would solely be they would only be selling by delivery. The state considers that a different sort of establishment. So that doesn't fall under our limitation of one retail. The retail establishment is for the brick and mortar.
But if
We're kind of, our hands are tied with that.
if they're buying in bulk, if they're buying in bulk and reselling, are people placing orders with them or with, for instance, Comcan? Where does the order come in from? Originate? Where does it originate?
A delivery operation company would be, you would be getting online with the delivery operator. You would be buying online, paying the delivery operator, and then their drivers would be delivering it to you. Whereas with the courier, you would be getting online and purchasing it through Comcan. And then your courier would go to Comcan and would pick up that one purchase, just that one order, and would deliver it to the individual.
I understand. I think what you've just described to me is contrary to the intent of allowing, having a ratio of 1 to 3, and now we're propagating additional, operators that are now selling and delivering. I understand what you're saying, and you can. I'm seeking for you to either affirm or correct my understanding.
I agree with you. Unfortunately, that is the way the state has defined it. And I think they differentiate between the fact that the delivery company, although they are selling the product, the delivery operator is not drawing more people into the town. It's just their delivery people going out. So it really doesn't, whether they're a courier type, the state is looking at it, the difference between courier and operator. It's not affecting the town in that it's bringing more people into the town of Millis.
Question.
Go ahead, Joyce.
Thank you. So the storage unit place could fill up a storage unit with all kinds of marijuana that was purchased?
No.
As a seller?
Absolutely not.
As a
Absolutely
delivery?
not, Joyce.
Okay.
No, this is a licensed CCC controlled business, just as a retail brick and mortar establishment, just as if they're a manufacturer, if they're a grower, if they're a tester. And actually in our bylaws, it does state that any sort of marijuana establishment has to be within a freestanding building. It cannot be in a strip mall. It cannot be attached to any other business. And it has to go through the rigorous licensing requirements that any other marijuana establishment has. So no, it's not a matter of we're just going to stick it in a holding facility.
No, you didn't let me finish. What I was saying though is if, say, somebody had a storage unit, say not the storage units, but say a storage unit, and chose to be a company that delivered, would they be able to fill that up to capacity and then in turn take orders? And would they have to have the same kind of security Comcan has?
Mr.
You
Chair.
could not.
Sorry to interrupt, but no, that would be illegal. So basically, to follow up what Nicole said, is that all of this has to go through the CCC. If somebody goes ahead and fills up a storage unit, they're basically breaking the law. By the way, sorry about that. Richard Nichols, Chairman of the Planning Board.
But what if it was a company that
They need to go through the process.
Correct.
If they don't go through the process, then they are not right.
Hold on. Now I'm going to step in. Joyce, let me have the floor, please. We're losing a little bit of control. It's been stated that essentially the requirements are exactly the same. If a business wants to come in and be an operator, they have to have the same physical security requirements and other requirements as the actual business. And I think I would just ask Joyce, let them affirm that. Tell me if that answers your question. And then, so I want Mr. Nichols, would you please answer that? And then we'll give it back to Joyce. But please, let's just one person talking at a time.
Yes, they would have to go through the same process. It has to be just like Concam. And
Okay.
they have to go through the exact same process.
Thank you. That's all I was asking.
Thank you.
Okay, good. Okay, anybody else?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'd like to ask a question of Nicole.
Go ahead, Jim.
Based on what you've said so far, if, let's say there's an operator in town and they get a license, does that mean that Millis can actually make more money? Because if they buy in bulk and they're selling outside, I assume only within the state, they probably can't sell outside the state, but potentially that could be more revenue for the town, no?
Correct. We would have the municipal impact fee that every business negotiates with the Board of Selectmen. We would also have the 3% 3% sales tax, just as we do with the brick and mortar retail sales facilities.
Great, thank you.
Nicole, a question for you, or Mr. Nichols. Is this coming about, I think you said because the CCC has essentially said, hey, you know, they're moving on it, and so they're issuing guidance, and the town is having to react or be proactive to have bylaws that address it. Is it also coming about because there are applicants, or which I think it sounds you said it's premature, that it's not quite ready for prime time, in the sense that the commission hasn't come up with their full, process. But does the town know of any interested operators?
That I would defer that question to Mr. Germain, because that information, if there was anybody interested, in, they would go directly through the select board.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Germain, would you like to comment?
We have no information as yet about anybody applying for this.
Okay, all right. Last call for questions on this issue. Okay, none heard. Ms. Riley, if you would go on to the solar ordinance.
Certainly. This amendment to the zoning bylaw, proposed amendment, is to expand what we currently have with regards to large-scale ground-mounted solar photovoltaic installations. Currently, this sort of solar establishment is only allowed in the IP1 and IP2 districts. The zoning board did have a couple come to the zoning board looking to have an extension to this regulation based upon a program that involves the Federal Department of Agricultural, Natural Resources and Conservation Services. Part of that program involves trying to give the option to farmers who are struggling another means of income. So it provides that land that is zoned, either that is currently used for agricultural purposes, horticultural purposes, or in which at least 50% of the total area is considered important farmlands as defined by the as the Department of Agriculture. So what we have done, this couple, came and asked to have this extension and possibly an overlay district that would cover their property and could be expanded at a later point in time. And the zoning board that wasn't something we would consider, because we just felt that it would constitute spot zoning. So we did look further into it, and there are, correct me if I'm wrong, Rich, I think there's like 8 or 10 properties that would fall under this that are at least 15 acres in total and that are currently being used for either agricultural, horticultural, or that would fall into this important farmland definition. So in these situations, if this bylaw is passed and amended, these farmers could come in and install a large-scale ground-mounted solar. It is at least 8 feet high, so that allows for, within the farmland, that the property owner would still be able to use it for farmland, whether it is for grazing cattle, sheep, or for growing crops. So it's just to give the farmers an additional source of revenue so that they can pretty much stay on their own 2 feet. So with that, considering that this could potentially be in a zone that is outside the IP1 or IP2 districts, we increased the setback requirements. So in the event if a piece of property was looking to utilize this, there would have to be a 50-foot setback with a treed 50-foot setback from all town roads, residence properties. So that would be for any land that abutted either conservation land, a residential district, or was property that was currently used for recreational purposes.
Nicole, could I just jump in for 1 minute? One other thing that I wanted to add to that is that they're required to actually continue the agricultural use of that property. So it's not like we'll allow them to put in the solar and then that's close enough. They actually are required to continue farming or raising animals on that property.
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead, Jody.
Yeah, so thank you for clarifying that, because the agricultural properties pay a lower tax rate than residential properties, as I understand it. And now we would be adding solar arrays, which is it's definitely different than your standard agricultural practice. I'm assuming that those, I'll call it solar farm, however you want to term it, those would produce personal property taxes for the town, even though those lands would still be taxed at the lower agricultural rate. Is that how that would work together?
With that, I would honestly have to defer that to maybe Bob Weiss. I would assume that would be correct. That wasn't something necessarily that, where we do zoning, we don't necessarily do the finance part. So great question. I honestly can't answer that, but Bob, who I see popping up right now, might be able to help us out with that.
Yeah, I popped up to say I can't answer that either, but it does sound. I'm going to defer to perhaps to Carol or to Mike on this, but it does sound like yes, there probably would be a personal property tax, because if the farmer ends up owning it, it's personal property, and if the developer ends up owning it, again, perhaps we would have something tantamount to what we're having over at the Clyde Brown with the pilot agreement. I don't know, Carol, maybe you can add to that.
We'll certainly have the assessor check into that. I would assume we do have another solar farm in town, and that one is taxed. We actually have a pilot agreement with that organization. So it's more than likely something similar would happen with those individuals in the chapter land. But again, we'll have the assessor check with the Department of Revenue, and then we'll be able to get back to you with actual information.
And if I could just pop back in, sorry, Jody.
Sure.
As I think about it, the person who is the contractor who's going to be providing the solar panels did actually mention a pilot agreement with the town. So I think that is in the works.
Yeah, I mean, my concern would be that, agricultural land gets taxed at a lower rate. Now we're almost turning it into a blended use of industrial and agricultural. And so, what does that do to that restricted land and the tax rate on that? That could have unintended consequences, shall we say, when it comes to tax rates. And so I think we just need to be need to understand the implications of the zoning change of what that could mean for individual property owners.
Yeah, Mr.
No, I
Chairman.
mean, that's a fair question on that. And what I would say on that, obviously, if it's an improvement to the property, yeah, I would assume it would be more tax revenue to the town. So it would be a benefit. But like, to your point, I think that's something we should look into.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Craig.
Yeah, when the last ordinance came up that got voted down at town meeting, the estimates were each, and I can't remember the size of the solar arrays, but each one of the solar farms was about $25,000 a year in personal property taxes, coming into the town, above and beyond the, any property or real estate taxes that would be coming in. So it's really that size of an impact. And it's interesting, if you take the school, the savings on the rate plus the pilot tax is about $25,000. So it seems like that's about the range that the range that these things come in.
Excuse me, this is Carol. The solar farm that we currently have does not give us anywhere, maybe half that, maybe.
No, these were the
12 or
large, much
13,000.
larger ones that they were talking about.
Right.
They were significantly larger because they had a guy who wanted to put it in, and that's what his estimated tax rate would have been under the pilot. So.
Okay. Any further comments or questions on large ordinance, the large farms? Okay, none heard. Mr. Nichols and Ms. Riley, thank you very much. Mr. Weiss, thanks for contributing as well again.
Great. Thank you, Nicole, for that. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. I see Mike is connected. He is on. Would you mind leading us through some discussion on the warrant?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did forward a great deal of information today to the Finance Committee. I'm assuming you all have that. I guess just in starting with the updated warrant, the Select Board has pretty much finalized the warrant. They're going to take their formal vote on Monday, but I don't see any radical changes to what's before you this evening. Just to touch upon a few items that have changed since your last meeting. I just want to draw your attention to Article 11. That is the Lansing Millis Memorial Building. We have changed the language on that article. We found that the prior language was a little misleading because it spoke about establishing a stabilization account, and it's not actually what we were doing. We were just funding a repair project. So that language has been clarified so that before it gets posted. Also, this is the only article on the warrant where we have not fully identified the funding source for this item. I know that the Select Board or members of the Select Board met with the Community Preservation Committee recently, and they're actually meeting with the committee again tomorrow evening to discuss if they have any interest in being part of this project. We are also looking, to see if there are any other funds available, although there is not any real great opportunities at this point for available funding for this, but we do know there is a need to do some work on this building to make sure it's secured so that we have options in the future to utilize the building. I don't know if there's any questions on that particular item. The next article is Article 17, and that is for road maintenance and repairs. I think the first time you may have seen the warrant that had a $50,000 number attached to it, that's been increased to $95,000. The Select Board feels strongly that we need to try to take some action in that area to address some of the most impacted roads and roads that are in really dire need for some repair and repaving. So Carol, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that of that
50,000 is general fund and 45,000 is free cash.
That's correct.
Okay, so that's the anticipated funding of that article at this point. And I think there's just one more item. Article 29, that amount has been changed to 7,700. Essentially that item just, number one, it rounds out the free cash funding available, but it also, in reviewing the unemployment insurance fund, which has been very active this year, we've had a lot of fraudulent claims that have come into the town. We've been very diligent in sifting through those and reporting those, but there is a lag between our reporting and the state. So we have not gotten all of our reimbursements yet from the state for the fraudulent claims. So we expect the dust to settle on that over the summer, and we'll have a better handle on what the needs are for the unemployment account. Carol, do you have anything else on that one you wanted to add?
Nope.
All right. That is essentially it on the warrant. Just to let the committee know, I think at this point, Articles 30 and 31, we're looking to dismiss those articles. You know, they'll be left on the warrant, but unless anything changes, those will be recommended for dismissal at the town meeting. We will seek to put some additional funds into those items at the fall town meeting.
For 30 and 31, Mike, can you?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Clarify?
That's the other.
I think you're
OPEB.
trying to,
It's OPEB.
That's the other post-employment benefits is Article 30.
No, I understand. But in terms of it being dismissed, ultimately, I think you're trying to lead a horse to water. You're trying to get us to recommend dismissal.
At this point, unless funding becomes available that we're not aware of between now and town meeting, we will be looking to put some amount of free cash into both OPEB and stabilization at the fall town meeting. Once we have that certified and gauge that against other needs, you know, as the budget grows, we have to keep an eye on the stabilization fund and make sure we're keeping at least 5% in that account. And we've also been reminded by Moody's and our auditors that we do need to put some amount of funds into the OPEB on a regular basis. So
Mike, let me interrupt. I understand, but now that they're on the warrant, it's up to the finance committee to decide whether or not they recommend dismissal. And so I think you're just planting the seed that likely, you know, that's the desirable course or the recommended course of action. And is that right? I mean, it hasn't been decided to dismiss those. We would have to recommend dismissal.
Correct. It would be our recommendation to the finance committee to plan on recommending dismissal of those articles unless conditions change between now and the town meeting.
Yep. Okay. That's fine. I understand the situation behind those.
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Craig.
Yeah, I see that the study committee for the charter review committee recommendations aren't on here. Is there any chance they'll make it onto the warrant in time, or is that ship has sailed?
That ship has sailed. I think the select board feels, I mean, it's going to be on their agenda again on Monday for discussion. My understanding is they feel that this is an extremely important issue, but that some more time is needed for a public discussion of those changes, and that with the hopes that we can have a more traditional town meeting in a traditional setting in order to make those important decisions. I mean, that's probably as far as I characterize it. Otherwise, you know, I would recommend if members of the finance committee are interested to tune into the select board meeting next week. They do have that item on their agenda for discussion.
And the other thing I just want to point out again, that we've been left with the warrant that has exactly as much money as the select board feels we should spend. They haven't put any alternative articles on it, even though I think all of us had voiced that, or many of us had voiced that concern. They've cut the Article 15 down to just the 3 municipal articles that they believe are the priority without leaving us in the opportunity. And I'm glad to see they have left OPEB and stabilization on the warrant. My fear was if those are removed, that completely ties our hands of where the money goes. It just rolls into free cash. But with the opportunity for us to put money in there, should we have extra money or decide that that's a priority, as Pete said, that Pete Berube, not Pete Germain, Pete Berube said, you know, they're on the warrant still, so it's our recommendation what goes into them. Because basically, if we disagree with anything the selectmen have put forward, there's no place left for us to put money except stabilization or OPEB, or increase the roads budget or increase the tree trimming article. So they've really limited choices again at town meeting, and that's a piece that has annoyed me for years. You know, it's basically turning us into the rubber stamp. We either agree with what they have, or it goes into free cash or stabilization. It's taken a lot of the control out of town meeting. And there's so I think that this is a very, you know, I disagree with the way this budget's being presented and this warrant's being presented, because I think it limits the choice of town meeting to a pretty extreme extent.
So noted. Any other inputs, Mike?
That's all I have on the warrant, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
I don't know the time frame that the Finance Committee has tonight, if you want to touch upon a few of the other documents that I submitted. I know they're not formally on your agenda, so I certainly just defer to you on that.
Mr. Chair, I have a quick question about the.
Hold on, stand by for 1 second. Mike, which documents are those?
Those were the host community agreement, the marijuana impact funds.
Okay.
As
yeah,
well
let's
as
go to that. And
okay,
let's go to that. And I think I heard Jody and Joyce
And
possibly,
Kathy.
so and Kathy. So just stand by, please. I'm going to let Mike discuss marijuana impact funds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I think it's the 7th item on the list of meeting materials.
There it is.
You bump that just a hair bigger, do you think? See the plus.
I can try.
A very tantalizing plus and minus button on the corner of the screen that don't do anything.
What page is it, Mr. Chair?
See it.
Well, there's a link on the meeting materials.
Yeah, I got
and,
it.
it's a 1-page table that I see.
Oh, it's not the one, Mr. Chair, that we've been looking at now. There's something else. There's another one. I saw it earlier. Okay.
87.
Yeah.
Page 87.
87. Thank you.
I just go to the website. It's nicely indexed. Whoever's doing that's doing a very nice job.
Thank
87.
you. Yes.
Thank you, Deirdre.
Yeah, I just went to that.
I could only figure this out.
Right there.
There you go.
There it is. Yep.
Perfect.
So, Mr. Chairman, in looking at the document, I just want to note that all the items in there are items that have been requested for funding from all the various departments within the town. However, and we have collected quite a sum of funds into that account. Unfortunately, those funds have to be certified by the Commonwealth before we're legally able to appropriate them and utilize them. And the total funds we have available is right around the $98,000 mark, where you noted that the spring town meeting recommendations for funding are. I'll just touch upon those particular items. The first, and these are the ones that are highlighted in yellow. The first is to extend the hours the library is open to the public on Saturdays during July and August.
Mike, can I just interrupt you real quick? I think we're familiar with these. So we're just looking at the ones in yellow right now.
That's correct.
Library extended hours, police 61,000 for the resource officer, the stipend for police, and then the rec department ones. Does anybody have any? Do you have anything more specific on that? I mean, I think we've heard those. I just want.
Right. And I don't mean to rehash over
see if
old
anybody
ground,
has
Mr.
any questions on those.
I do, Mr.
Yep.
Chair.
Go ahead, Kathy.
Thank you. Through the chair, Mr. Kaczynski, are these funds supposed to be, are these that can be used for anything, or are they specific to the marijuana issue?
The funds are scheduled to be used for items that have a nexus to the impact of the new marijuana industries that are in effect in the community. So they're either have a direct item, as in marijuana education, or programs to try to deter underage individuals from utilizing marijuana, or direct impacts having to do with policing, things such as that. So they're supposed to have some nexus to the marijuana industry in the community.
Yeah, I figured that, but I just want to make sure that perhaps when people are reading this, that they realize, well, why is the library open on July and August? Well, is it going to keep kids from smoking pot to be there? Or is it, like you said, there has to be some sort of nexus. And to me, the most important one would be like the Board of Health is proving that. That's very important. And you know what I'm saying, Mike? That at least say in them what the developmental and physical disabilities, I understand that. But when I was working on this with Jim McCaffrey, the Cannabis Control Commission made certain that they are going to check every dollar that's used by the towns in this, because they didn't want this just to become a tax that, and I know Craig knows this too, a tax that would be used to just fund general government. So although these all seem like they could fit into education of marijuana and drug use, make sure that it's a little tighter than that when you're submitting these and requesting the marijuana money from it. That's all I have to say about it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman?
Quickly, yes.
Just wanted to add that I totally agree with the point made by Ms. McGinnis, in that, yes, we do need to track these. We do need to make sure we describe and define the connection. This list in front of you is just a composite list. It isn't intended to be a full explanation of every item, but it's a point well taken.
And let me just add, if I might, Pete, that the commission has taken away money from towns, and I know Mike knows this. There's a newsletter that comes out, and I should share it with everybody, that they've taken away money that towns have utilized for one item through marijuana money, because they didn't see the nexus between it. So that's the last thing we want to have happen to us, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Doug?
Yeah, to Mike's point about this being a summary, my question is the total that's on here, is this a combined total of both host agreement funds and retail tax revenue? Or
No.
is this is just
okay. That was my question too.
This is just the HCA payments.
This
period.
is just host community agreement payments, not retail taxes.
That's correct. The taxes go directly into the general fund.
Okay, so my question, my issue with this is that I want to make sure that one of two things is true. Either the host community agreement money is being spent on non-operating budget items from a long-term perspective, or if they are essentially operating budget items like salaries and such for things, that it's clear that those are a finite time period that they will be in place, and that when that time period ends, which would coincide with the end of the HCA payments, those go away.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman?
Sorry.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yes, we've had discussions with all the department heads that are submitting these items. As you can see, the items are varied. Some of them are summer programs. Some of them are certain additional hours. certain educational programs. And the department heads are aware that upon the cessation of these funds, when that does occur, that that these programs will go away unless there's available funding for them. There's no guarantee that they will stay in place post HCA agreement funding.
Excuse me,
Okay.
Mr. Chair, it's Carol.
Go ahead, Carol.
These funds need to be requested every year by a department. No one is guaranteed, other than the request for this year, that the request doesn't automatically roll over. They have to re-request for the following year.
Right. I think we understand that. And just to reiterate Doug's point, which has been made several times, especially by Mr. Schultz, is that when you put an item that's a budgetary item that is not necessarily annually budgetarily funded, you're creating yourself a problem, or you must acknowledge it and know that that money, the resources for whatever you add, is going to go away. It's just,
Exactly. No, that's true.
Yep. So I think we all aware of that. And
Yeah. I'm going, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, please.
Great job summarizing the point I wasn't going to make because Doug did it so well. I've got another point though.
Keep it quick.
School resource officer was $80-something thousand, not $61,000. So are they absorbing the $20,000 in their normal operating budget, or the differential in their normal operating budget? Or are we again underfunding it on the hopes that we vote the money in November to fund it fully?
That's what they're doing.
Mr. Chairman, if I may answer that.
Hold on one second. Kathy, please mute your mic. Go ahead, Mike.
So if you look at the chart, you look at the item under school resource officer salary in yellow, you'll see the school resource officer salary in white. That is scheduled to be funded at the fall town meeting. The select board had a discussion on Monday evening in regards to this, and determined that they would rather put off the balance of the funding for the school resource officer and be able to fund some of the items that are more time sensitive to the summer months, since a funding in the fall would not be of benefit to them, such as the July and August hours at the library and the summer program at the recreation department and the teen program coordinator. So that was that issue was discussed by the select board, and that's how they voted to move ahead with the budget recommendation.
And Mr. Chairman.
Okay, hold on one second. That makes perfect sense, except for school is not in session from July, August. So I'm not sure why the funds for the school resource officer. I'm sure there's a reason. I'd like to hear it. As to why the funds would be needed in the spring and not flipped, where most of it would be funded in the fall.
Mr. Chairman, if I can answer that. The school
Please.
resource officer is a year-round position. In the summertime, the school resource officer still works with the school for troubled children over the summer, as well as the summer programs that the police department holds. They do a summer camp. So that is a year-round position with the school resource officer. That's not a 9-month-a-year position.
Okay, thank you, Craig.
Yeah, I just don't. I understand the reasoning behind it. I guess you want to get the summer programs in so you can do the summer programs, but it's I just don't like when we start dividing things up like that. We're basically understating our police department salaries, and if we don't have any funds available, if the funds aren't voted by the voters in the fall town meeting appropriately, we have a $26,000 hole in the police department budget, if I understand correctly, because we're going to keep paying this guy at his regular salary with the hopes of getting the $26,000 in the fall. That's the plan. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
Yes, we know the funds are available. They are just not certified yet for the host community agreement impact funds. They will be available in the fall. Certainly, there's always a chance town meeting may choose not to fund that. If that were the case, then the police department would have to adjust its operations for the remainder of the fiscal year, either through how the resource officer is utilized in the school or some other adjustment.
Mike, please confirm for me that the items in yellow, that's the select board's recommendation.
That's correct.
And lastly, I assume that at some point the Council on Aging's request will get modified or removed.
That is certainly a high possibility. We're going to be, since it's not we're in the fall, we're not near the fall yet, that very well be removed. I would agree with that estimation.
Okay, I just think we've through several discussions, I think there was a lot of concern on that particular request, and it doesn't, in my humble opinion, doesn't meet the nexus of marijuana and the community impact. So I'd like to see that removed, but that's not my duty to do that. So only to
Mr.
voice
Chair?
the, go ahead, Kathy.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on that. Is that position somewhere else now, Mr. Kaczynski?
Yes, Mr. Chair, if I may. So that is in one of the above level service requests, which I think Deirdre just put up on your screen. So that is listed as item 3. So yes, that was, I believe that was submitted in both places, so that would be removed going forward, assuming it's in here.
So, Mr. Chair, the Finance Committee is seeing this position for the first time on the non-marijuana available money.
That's not true. That
Okay.
information was included in the packet of information provided by the department manager at the beginning of the budget season. So that's in the Council on Aging information as an above level service request. And then
Thank you.
also,
It was a I'm sorry, I don't mean to bicker, Mr. Chair, but it was a request. What I'm saying is that as the town administrator recommendations, when did that first appear, Ms. Carroll? If I may, through the chair.
Okay.
the recommendation has always been through the town administrator has always recommended it, I believe.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, Michael.
I put these recommendations for these items through to the select board several weeks ago when we were going through the budgets. Just to jump ahead now to this sheet, since it's on the screen, the select board, at the strong urging of the finance committee, rated the different projects as in a priority rating as they saw it, and you'll see those items listed. And I'd be happy to discuss any of them if you'd like, but I think they're in your packet.
So as I understand it, Mike, I'm looking at the same document, which is in the meeting materials link that Deirdre sent out on the Finance Committee web page. That 48,000, which was also previously requested to be funded through the marijuana impact funds. Am I correct? The same $48,000 is in both places.
That's correct.
It's 45,000 on the marijuana
Okay.
one. Because she didn't include postage.
Okay. Okay, but we're essentially talking about the same request, which to me, it further undermines the request. The fact that we're advocating for additional hours, and in one spot, and the other spot we're advocating for an outreach program, which doesn't meet the requirement. So what are I know what the added hours are, but unfortunately, they've undermined the importance or the validity of that request by otherwise tying it to HCA. I mean, it should have just been requested in one place, and it should have it's almost like they did an end around so that they could get funding through HCA, even though it wasn't a real good use of HCA funds.
I concur, Mr. Chair.
If that's where the select board placed it, number 3 on the must fund list, then so be it, and we'll discuss that further and vote on it.
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
I actually think that I agree with what you've said to a very large extent. I personally believe that extended senior hours, because the things that I've read and things that I've seen are baby boomer generation is the one that is having a lot of recently retired or really starting to have issues with using the retail marijuana. So I think there is a nexus. But my thought is, if that nexus truly exists, and not for education on the benefits of it, but provide programming for the avoidance of, basically, why can't it wait until the fall town meeting, not fund that position now, increase the hours at the fall town meeting using marijuana money instead of burdening the budget with it? And then when we find out if it works or not, if our enrollment or our participation increases dramatically because of the extra hours, then there's a strong case to be made to include it in the budget without impacting the budgets now. I'm worried about putting that $48,000 into the budget as above level service. These aren't must fund items. These are the above level service items. So to me, even though they've rated it a number 3, since I do believe there's a nexus to the marijuana money, and if we wait till the fall, we could use it, phrased slightly differently than the way they've written it, but there is a nexus, I believe. I just am concerned about that being an above level service item rated number 3 above the heavy equipment operator position, even at the DPW, which is critical.
Greg, if I may, I understand what you're saying. There's a nexus to every age group and every community member. You could make a compelling point, right? But to say that unfortunately, to say that the nexus is valued, or the ability to address that nexus cost $48,000 for the seniors, we know that that's not the case. We know that, my opinion, we don't know, but my opinion is that they're trying to use the nexus to fund it out of HCA money and not the budget where it belongs. And there's probably some other smaller portion that could be funded out of Nexus HCA money, either in the spring or the fall. Unfortunately, I think that the requests were poorly timed or poorly justified, and now that's left this question as to whether they should be in there at all at this point.
And I agree with you entirely on that point. My view was that if it hadn't been, I'd have an issue, but if
Mr.
it
Chair?
hadn't been, you have a stronger case. I totally agree with that.
Go ahead, Doug.
I think everything that's been said about those two items, those two lines is true. I don't necessarily doubt that there's a use for more hours at the senior center. And I think it's a fairly regular request, and it's something that at some point we're going to have to address that, and it's going to have to, the hours are going to have to go up. But sorry, with all due respect, I don't think seniors need to be educated on the benefits of using marijuana. I mean, we're talking about adults here, right? It's one thing to be talking about, kids that don't necessarily know better or don't have life experience, but that's a pretty big stretch in my mind. So
yeah,
I think the operating budget for extra hours is where that should be, and we can talk about whether we think it should be spent there or not.
Yeah, I agree with you, Doug, and I just think they muddied the waters when they put it under HCA. I can support the additional hours. I wish they just left it there and let us debate it on the merits standalone of having additional hours in the senior center. But they muddied the waters. It's still on the list, but however, I don't think it's, I hope to see it gone come fall town meeting. I don't think it belongs there. Anyway. Last call on this particular discussion item, and then we have to double back because there were some people that had some questions on some of the article items.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
So I cut off Joyce and Jody, and I did recognize Doug.
Joyce here.
Go ahead, Joyce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mike, I'm sorry I missed your explanation about the unemployment and the state verifying unemployment or the validity. Would you explain that, please?
Absolutely. This has been probably the most unusual year in my career dealing with unemployment issues. And just to explain, I know the Finance Committee knows this, for those that might be watching. Unlike most private businesses, municipalities in Massachusetts are generally self-insured for unemployment. So that's why we set aside money in an unemployment fund, and we pay out of that. The state assesses us unemployment costs when we do lay off individuals. But I would say this year, for every valid employee that filed for unemployment, we had probably 50 fraudulent claims that came through. So it's been a large part of the operations manager's time to be constantly checking these lists and contacting the state and dealing with this. And the way the state works is somewhat convoluted. They send us bills for these, and then we have to pay them. We have a certain amount of time to pay them, or we get penalized. So we pay them, and then we notify them of all the fraudulent fees or fraudulent claims that are coming through. So we cover the town that way, but there's a lag time between that and when the town credits us back the payments for those fraudulent
the state,
applications.
right, Mike?
The state. So there's a process. So we're expecting, we've gotten some credits back from the state. We're expecting more credits. And this has been a kind of a moving issue that we've been trying to track. We expect some large credits to come back over the next several months. And that's why we believe that we don't need to add a significant amount of funding to unemployment. We believe that lower number will be sufficient to at least take us through the fall.
Mike, can I ask you to clarify really quick, because I think this helps clear it up, or that these fraudulent claims are not from employees, that they're not from town employees. They're from people that make a claim on a social security number that's stolen or an address or something. So the claims come in.
Correct.
And the town still has to deal with them.
And
So
just
there
to
are-
let you know, Pete, I got, Karen Beret called me on one. Someone had filed, used my name, or I don't know what, filed it. So, and there were quite a few of them.
I understand.
So every time-
The same thing happened to my wife this year, and it's a rampant problem.
Yeah. So every
it's
time
not
we get a
employees.
claim,
All right, that makes it, that's what, I guess that's where I missed. I'm saying, how
Right.
many employees could possibly?
so the employees were not filing claims fraudulently. Other people were using our employees' names, filing because of security breaches that have happened in the past. And with these large companies, they get their IT systems hacked, and they get people's lists of names and all kinds of information enough to file for these claims. And they file directly with the state, and then the state sends us a list of all these folks, and then we have to go through the list and identify which ones are fraudulent.
Thank you.
I need to get us back on track really bad. And so before I do that, Jody, did you have an item earlier?
I did. So in the packet was information on the land sale of Acorn Street, but we have not touched on that yet.
Yep, I have a note on there. Mike, can you fill in some blanks?
Yes, it's a small parcel, approximately an acre of land. It's landlocked. I believe, I think I sent just some information to the committee about the approximate address. Because it's not right on the street, it doesn't have an actual address. It's a parcel and lot number. I believe it's behind 96 to 99 Acorn Street, in that vicinity. And I think I did forward some maps. Correct me if I'm wrong. I thought I had some maps out.
Yep.
So we've been approached by an individual in town, one of the builders, who I think may have some projects in the area. I believe they're seeking to purchase the property to use it as an emergency access. So the board was considering, just asking for authorization to auction the property, since it really has no direct use for the community. So that's really the long and the short of it at this point. So the town owns it. We're not collecting any taxes on it, and it really doesn't have any active use for the community. It's surrounded and landlocked.
So it looks like it's
What
only
other-
accessible
what
by
other
a right of
committees
way.
have-
Sorry.
No, go ahead. Mike, if you could address that, only through the right of way it's accessible.
Yes, it's only accessible from the adjacent properties. I don't believe it's accessible, to the general public. there may be a private right of way near it.
The map does show a right of way, so.
Yeah, it's probably not well laid out in person, but it shows on the map.
Mike, have any other committees reviewed this? Any other town bodies?
We
Offices?
have not got any feedback from any other boards and committees, and I don't know. I will say we have not. I don't believe we've got any feedback from any of the boards. We have been consulting with the assessing office to get all the information in regards to the parcel, but we can certainly, get some additional information prior to the town meeting, and certainly, like I said, this is an authorization. If even if the town meeting authorizes it, the select board is not bound to auction it, or they could set minimum prices on it.
Is there a public valuation, or has the interested party made an offer with a dollar figure?
We have the party has said they'd be willing to pay at least assessed value for the property. As I said, the board would still have if it was given authorization by town meeting, they could still set a minimum price on it above that. That would be up to the board if they're given authorization to sell it.
Okay, Jody, sorry to hijack that. Anything else from you? I know you have this one.
No, that was my question. I had already looked into it, through GIS, which is a great tool if folks ever want to figure out these things. It goes into the details on these parcels pretty incredibly. So you had my questions of, do we have an offer? And
Mr. Chair, about that?
Go ahead, Kathy. Yep, go ahead, Kathy.
I'd like to speak against this, first of all, because a right-of-way does not make it landlocked. There is a right-of-way for certain people to use that. And down the road, down the years, this is free land to the town, even though a few dollars in taxes aren't being received from it. This could be used as a tree farm. It could be used as a cell tower somewhere. It could be used as a water treatment plant. With PFAS, you don't know where something might need to be thrown there. And I'm so against this that you're giving a developer perhaps access to more land. So I know we're not talking about this article yet, but if you'd want me to do a little more review on it or join with the GIS, Jody is so correct. I asked everyone to look at that. But this needs further thinking, I think, Mr. Chair, and I thank you for letting me speak to it.
Okay. Thank you. So, Mike, and everybody, if you would go to the draft articles, I guess first things first is confirm for me the status of the warrant as we're looking at it. What is the official status of the warrant as of today, Michael?
The official status of the warrant is everything on the warrant has been approved to be on there by the select board. And the select board will have a meeting on Monday to approve and ratify the warrant. Certainly, they still have a legal.
Is it premature for us to vote on things, or can we start officially making recommendations?
I think that's up to the finance committee. I mean, the one thing I would ask is if the board does make any changes to any of the articles, that the finance committee would take them up again for a fresh vote at your meeting next Wednesday, only because they still could tweak an article or two between now and next Monday. But I do not expect any radical changes to the document from what's in front of you.
Okay. So with that said, I am going to try to plow through the bad choice of words. I'm going to try to go through the article as presented to us for tonight. Mike, I would like for you to stay with us and just chime in as to whether you think we can vote on these as we go, or whether you think something is likely to change, in which case we can defer it to next week. If we don't make some headway on some of this stuff now, we're in for a couple of extremely long meetings, and I know this is going to draw this one out, which is fine. We should all have expected some long meetings as we approach town meeting. Any
Mr. Chair,
objections? Go ahead.
I just have one quick question to Mike. You mentioned something on Article 11. I didn't catch all of that. What is? I understand what it is. I understand it's a repair project for the Lansing Mills. The dollar amount that's listed there, what proposed funding source is that that the select board is looking at? Is that CPA funds or?
That's what I was mentioning at the beginning, that is the one article that we do not have a dedicated funding source identified as of tonight. So that is certainly an article that I would recommend, if possible, the Finance Committee hold off voting a recommendation on that this evening. I will tell you that the Select Board is meeting with the Community Preservation Committee tomorrow evening to discuss this, to determine if there's any desire on their part to collaborate with the Select Board on some funding for this article. Probably something far short of the full 363 at this point, but it's something that is still up for discussion, and that is probably one of the articles of the few that may be adjusted on Monday by the board. So again, if there's a single article I would recommend you hold off on, that would be it.
Okay, well, I have a feeling that there'll be a few others, but I want to thanks, Doug, and thank you, Mike. We're going to go through starting up at Article 1. And so I'll take
Mr. Chairman.
Mike, I'm sure it's unpaid bills. It can't be that cosmic that we can't do something on unpaid bills. Go ahead,
Mr.
Craig.
Chairman, I move that we recommend approval of unpaid bills for $572.91. Somebody say
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve unpaid bills for, excuse me.
Deidre had it on the screen a moment ago.
I'll get there. I'm sorry about that. Unpaid bills in the amount of $572.91. Discussion.
Do we know
Funding source.
the funding source?
Funding source is free cash.
Okay.
Okay, free cash. This requires a four-fifths majority at town hall, but we certainly can. Any further discussion?
Should we expect any more of these to pop up between now and the?
I do not expect to be adding any more items to this list. No, not for this meeting.
Okay, I'm gonna do a Deirdre so that you're ready. I'm gonna do these one by one. Actually, on this particular one, we're just a general vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? And so we're going to recommend approval. Okay. Article 2.
Mr. Chairman, I'd recommend that the Finance Committee hold off on a recommendation on Article 2. Carol and I have just finalized the transfers, but seeing that we have not gotten that out to the committee yet, we'll certainly be able to get that out to you within the next day or so.
Yeah, and Mr. Chairman, I'd say Articles 2 through 7 we should skip over. They'll relate to the budget, and
Yep.
So I'll move that we recommend Article 8 as written.
Second.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Jody. It's been moved and seconded for the consent article. Oh boy, this is a big one. To authorize revolving funds as listed, and let's see.
And CPA funds are in there also. It looks, and the community preservation funds. Those are the two big areas. And we can vote funding sources at a later date quickly too, right before the meeting, just to get through these to get a recommendation out if we need to.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, none heard. All those in favor of approving Article 8, recommending Article 8, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Any abstentions? Okay,
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Finance Committee recommend approval of Article 9, Community Preservation Historic Resource Reserve Fund, Phase 2, Walling Map Rehab for $1,469.
I second.
okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the rehabilitation of the Henry F. Walling Map Phase 2 using community preservation funds in the amount of $1,469. Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All
Mr.
those dissenting say nay. And any abstentions? Okay,
Mr. Chairman, I move that the committee recommend approval of Article 10, Community Preservation Open Space Recreation Reserve Fund, middle school, high school dugout project, $10,300 using CPA Open Space Recreation Resource Reserve Funds.
Second.
it's been moved and seconded to approve the Millis High School dugout project using funds as listed in the amount of $10,300. Discussion. Mike, do you know, or does anybody know if they modified the dugout plan to provide fencing the whole way vertical?
I'm honestly not sure on that. I'd have to check.
Me neither. I'm just going to have to go with faith, and they agreed at the time. Mr. Maltinsky did catch it. So any more discussion on this one? Okay, all those in favor of approving or recommending for approval Article 10, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Abstentions? Thank you. Article 11, we're going to bypass or defer.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we recommend approval of Article 12, the independent audit for $36,750.
Second.
Funding source, Craig?
I don't know the funding source for that, but again, we can do that at another later date if we need to.
Mr.
It's
Chairman,
under free cash.
that's from free cash.
Okay, then free cash.
Okay. Discussion, please. None heard. All those in favor of approving recommending for approval Article 12 for an independent audit amount of $36,750 from free cash, please say aye.
Aye.
Those recommending disapproval say nay. And no, any abstentions? None heard. Okay, Article 13, Mike. I think we should. Mike, if I approach one, please just interject.
Yeah, no, I think the next few are fine.
Okay. Article 13.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I move that we recommend approval of Article 13, the FY22 personal property interim year inspections by the Board of Assessors for $20,000. And is that free cash as well?
That's free cash, yes.
Second.
Free cash.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the $20,000 for fiscal year 22 personal property interim year inspections and real estate interim revaluations in the amount of $20,000 out of free cash. All those in favor say aye.
I have a question.
I'm sorry. Discussion.
Sorry, don't mean
No,
to
it's not you. That's my fault.
derail this. But it looks like in prior years when we had this article, the amount was a lot higher than 20,000. Has the cost on doing these interim inspections gone down?
There's an interim inspection that's done every year, and that is what is 20,000. In the next article, this is the beginning of that FY 2023 recertification process. So that's an extra 18,000.
Okay.
Next year, we'll have to do another 18,000 to complete the FY 2023 recert, as well as an additional funding for FY 2023 reval and personal property.
Okay, so like every 3 years, it's a lot higher and then it's the lower amount in the interim years?
Right, what they're doing now is it's going to be 5 years for recertifications.
Ah,
So
that would be nice.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, didn't mean to derail, but I was looking at the prior year's Finance Committee reports and noticed that the amount was a lot higher in a previous year.
No problem. And you didn't just derail us. You just kind of caught me speeding because I went right by discussion. So any further discussion?
No, and that too is from free cash.
That's correct.
Yes.
Okay, Article 14, all those in favor of recommending for approval. I'm sorry, we're at Article 13. I'm speeding again. Sorry. All those in favor of recommending approval for $20,000 for fiscal year 22 personal property interim year inspections and the real estate interim revaluations in the amount of $20,000 out of free cash, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those recommending disapprovals, please say nay. Any abstentions? Unheard. Okay, Article 14.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we fund Article 14, recommend approval of Article 14, FY23 recertification process Board of Assessors as described so eloquently by Carol on Article 13 for $18,000. Again, I'm going on the limb, but using free cash.
That's correct.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to recommend for approval the recertification process for FY23 in the amount of $18,000 out of free cash. Discussion. None heard. All those in favor of recommending approval, please say aye.
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 Aye. Those not recommending approval, please say nay. Any abstentions? Okay, none heard. Article 15, I would like to defer it. I'm requesting to defer it, and just so I can keep this moving along, and it's as a budget item that potentially could get affected by the other budget items. We'll defer on that one.
Okay.
So,
Mr. Chairman,
anybody want any discussion on that or have any questions on that one?
Just a question.
Go ahead, Joyce.
Tree pruning was taken out?
it's the next
It's a
item.
separate article. It's actually, and it mainly because it's not a capital item.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to again state my desire to see options there, but that's been beat to death and has fallen on deaf ears at the select board. So,
Well, I
excuse
don't
me.
agree with your last statement, but I understand where you're coming from.
it hasn't changed. I mean, this is what we've got
I
in the
know.
last 3 years. It's an all or nothing article. There's no option for, if extra funds become available, nothing we can put them towards except tree pruning and roads, which are both good things. But
Yeah.
we don't have a lot of latitude in the capital warrant to be able to do additional capital items.
I understand. There's also no sidewalks in there.
Exactly.
Okay.
right.
Okay, moving on to Article 16.
Mr. Chairman, I recommend that we, I move that we, I got to get my wording right now. I'm on a new committee, not the permanent building. I move that we recommend approval of Article 16, tree pruning and removal for $40,000.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we recommend for approval $40,000 for tree trimming and removal out of free cash. Please.
Actually, Mr. Chairman, this is raise and appropriate.
Okay, raise and appropriate. So we'll clarify that. I'm going to leave that out of this particular vote, and we'll clarify that next time around. We'll get it straight. So it's been moved and seconded that we approve $40,000 for tree trimming and removal, period. Discussion. None heard. All those in favor of approval of the article, please say aye.
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 Mr. Chairman,
Those not recommending approval, say nay. And those abstaining. Okay, it's approved. Go ahead, Craig.
I'd like to hold an Article 17 because it is the one place where we have latitude to put extra funds if we need to. And
Okay.
as we budget recommendations and other things, if there are available funds, if we have available funds, I'd like to consider that as a use for them since we have.
Yeah, I agree. And I'd just comment that if we need to go back and reopen Article 16, we can as well. Reconsider it.
Thank you.
And that's not to say I'm opposed to the 95,000. I'm hoping to find additional beyond 95. Yeah, I think the 95 is a floor is the way I see it right now. Mr. Chairman, I move that we recommend approval of Article 18, new school computer lease year 1 for $23,300. Using free cash, I assume.
Yes, free cash for that one.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we recommend approval of a new lease and purchase for computers for Millis School in the amount of $23,300 out of free cash. Discussion.
Mr. Chair, Kathy McInnes.
Go ahead, Kathy.
I would just hope that someday this would be a budget item within the school. And I don't know if that could be done ever, but for something like that, it seems like it's a yearly and should somehow find its way into the school budget. Thank you.
I agree with you, Kathy.
So do I.
Any further discussion? Okay, none heard. All those in favor of recommending Article 18, please say aye.
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 Aye. Those not recommending approval, say nay.
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 Kathy McInnes.
Let's just we'll do a name by name vote.
You want to do both?
Is that okay, Deirdre? You ready?
Yeah, in a sec.
I'll take notes too. Okay, Pete B, yay. Craig.
Yay.
Joyce.
Nay.
Kathy.
Nay.
Doug.
Yay.
Jim.
Nay.
Jody.
Yay.
I'm sorry, say again.
Yay.
Thank you. And Katie.
Yay.
Yay.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question on that? I know we voted it, but just for going forward. If the proposal would be to increase the school base budget by the lease amounts and then remove them from both the capital list and school list, the warrant list for this capital and the warrant list for the new items, but so increase it by 69,000, call it 70,000, and that removes them permanently from the warrant. That's something I think we absolutely should discuss in future years. I just think moving the expenses of $70,000 over without moving the funds, it would be the only issue. I think the same thing with police cars would work and the other lease items as well. But that's a further discussion and not for this year, but I do understand the point.
I think that I agree, and I think we just need to hammer this out at a tri-board and get everybody on the same page of music. And literally, this should be a main topic for a tri-board because we keep kicking the can on it.
Yeah, and if we were to put the money into the budget 1 year, just do it. And same thing with the police cars leases, then you're pretty much done discussing them. It's just part of the base budget. So, yeah.
Is there any way that this could be recommended to be dismissed?
Well, I don't think we'd want to. I 3 of the 8 wish to dismiss. The others don't. So the recommendation is not to dismiss. But
I don't think that the finance committee can recommend dismissal. I suppose we could, but really the dismissal is up to the townspeople or the select board. I mean, we're just recommending the article as written.
Yeah, we're recommending approve the article, but having read the meeting, the book that Jody put together, you do qualify for a minority report. So, but anyway.
That's right. We'll vote on that next.
Yeah.
I can assure you that the police chief would love to just wrap it into his budget. So.
Yeah. So I mean, what I think you do is you just move the budget up 1 year. You're done with it. It eliminates discussion. But okay. So Article 19. May I make a motion on that one? Or
you certainly can.
Let's move it. I move, after I digress best, I move that the Finance Committee recommend approval of a design and construction of drainage on Village Street and Birch Street for $711,728 using Stormwater Enterprise Fund.
Actually, Mr. Chairman, this would be a borrowing through the Stormwater Enterprise Fund.
You're borrowing through the Stormwater Enterprise Fund.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to recommend for approval Article 19 in the amount of $711,728 via borrowing for the Stormwater Enterprise Fund for the design and construction of drainage rehab at Village and Birch Streets. Discussion.
I look forward to discussing with Mr. whatever his name is that complains about the Stormwater Fund every single town meeting.
Pointing towards this one.
Any additional discussion? All those in favor recommending approval of Article 19 as moved, please say aye.
Aye.
All those recommending disapproval, please say nay. And any abstentions? None heard. Okay.
I move that the Finance Committee recommend approval of Article 20, the 61A purchase Braun property at 377 Village Street for 23.1 acres using for $1 million using borrowing. This is not a Prop 2.5 override, so it will not increase the tax rate with this borrowing. This would be within the normal debt schedule.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the Finance Committee recommend for approval the purchase of property listed at 377 Village Street in Millis via a borrowing, which would be less than the Prop 2.5 override. Discussion. I'll start some discussion on this one because I'm torn on it, and I'm anxious to hear how other people feel about it, but not necessarily for consensus. But you know, this is a tough one because of revenue. I understand why people would vote either way on this one for capturing the revenue that's potentially there, and also the opportunity for the land, the town to acquire land, which could be very valuable for any number of uses in the future. I totally get those points. Honestly, haven't made up my mind on this one. And my recommendation actually is that we defer this one to give us a little bit more time to consider. And I don't think it's would be difficult for us to take a little bit more time and vote on this one for next week. Mainly just because I haven't made up my mind on it, and it is a tough one.
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
I absolutely understand. It's hard to say no to potential tax revenue, but the way the select board has proposed purchasing this land by using unrestricted debt, it's not using the CPC money or anything else. It makes it available for future use. And if that future use is determined to be resale, 40B, it just opens up every possibility for the town to use it. It's not restricted recreation. And let me be clear, I don't think restricting it just for recreation is a bad idea. I value open space, I value recreation, but this has given the town a lot of latitude, a lot of ability to consider how it's going to be used. And anytime open space comes along, it's hard to pass up because the town has access to only a certain amount, and you know, we don't bid on every piece of property that comes out. It has to be in the 61A status for us to be able to really make an offer that has merit. So it is a tough call. I do agree with you, and I don't think it's a bad idea to wait a week, but I did finally settle on the side that the open space was worth more to me purchased this way than the potential tax revenue or the development at this time. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that. 1 second, Kathy.
Oh, sorry.
Craig, I appreciate that. And the one thing that I would say that would help me see it that way is maybe just saying this, in that I hope that the town, I'm not a huge proponent of studies unless they produce something actionable. The town does have property that it owns, and I am unaware, and I'm happy to be corrected or enlightened but I am unaware that the town has a master plan or land use plan that says what it would do with the property it has and the property that it stands, other 61A properties, including this one, what it would do in the long term. If, I would advocate for that highly, that a master plan be done so that this just doesn't become property that we hold on to when we increase the tax burden, yet we don't have a plan to do something with it.
And I agree with you 100% on that. I mean, that's one of the things I think is most important. We need to put together a committee. And again, I serve on Parks Committee, but I understand the value of them as well, purpose, if we can accomplish something. But a committee to produce the actionable report for open space, philosophy, use, and then set aside money to maintain them each year at some level. Doesn't have to be a huge amount to maintain them, because right now they could use some help. So, I think that this piece of property, as I said, the way it's being purchased is what finally swayed me, that it can be used for anything. It can be used as the town sees appropriate in the future. And if future generations decide that it's a resale property, it certainly is going to have, well, land's not going to lose value. So I think it has potential all the way around.
Okay. Anybody else?
Well, and by Craig, so I'm sorry. Go ahead, Kathy.
No, go ahead.
Good. I'm sorry, Kathy, go ahead.
I just want to mention something, if I could, about I've talked to, I'm going to just say something for a few minutes. I've talked for the last several days to senior citizens, I'm being one of them, my age and the much older ones. And what I've heard about senior housing is that people are looking for another Kennedy Terrace, which I heard from someone that if the town provides the land, you work with your executive director at the housing authority. She's a state employee, and our elected officials. We have housing authority officials, and apply to the state, and the state builds them, but you have to come up with the land for it. I think we should be addressing those folks that get another Kennedy Terrace in town, and perhaps, Pete, this would be the land for it. And I'd just like to remind you about the revenue. Revenue comes and goes. Revenue has a lifespan of 4 years or something. And I'd also like to say that there's someone on one of the boards in town who has individually contacted all the people at Glen Ellen to come to town meeting and speak against the land purchase, because he quotes that there's a lot of land the town has that they're not doing anything with, which is why several people have pushed the selectmen to give the DPW $20,000 so that they could start mowing fields and buying tables and stuff, so people could be using the properties. Verderber Farm on Pleasant Street, because like you and I discussed, Pete, there's no sidewalks anywhere. So you try to put these little pockets in the neighborhoods. And, I'll leave it at that but who's ever going to be selectmen and who's going to run someday, and there's a selectman now, you've got to address that, not the senior housing, the $500,000, $600,000 housing. There are a few old timers that I didn't know that left town, and they went out of state because they can't afford Millis. They can't afford it anymore. I never knew anybody like that until someone was telling me that there are people, you thought they just moved to, nice weather and stuff, time to go south, but no, they're leaving because they're making a good profit on their homes. They're fighting on the sidewalks or the driveways to buy a home in Millis, and they're taking their money out of state. And perhaps people thought if there was more, there's a long list for the housing at Kennedy Terrace. And, let's think about that too as we're thinking about purchasing this land. Thanks for my rambling.
We appreciate it. And so I would like to hear some comments to the effect of whether people are ready to vote on this. If the committee wants to vote on this and is ready to vote on it, then let's do it. If so, you know, can everybody just kind of speak up? Are they ready to vote on it, or do they need more time to consider it?
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead, Jody.
Yeah, I am not ready to vote on this yet. I see both sides of it, and this is a tough one. The price isn't super high, but for all the reasons that have just been stated, and I think Kathy brings up a good point of the possibility of the town using this for affordable housing or affordable senior housing. I think that's a good point to raise. So I would like some more time to think about this and to investigate it.
And what I might add, for if I could, Pete, I'm really sorry, but I think everybody that's on committee should get out there and you know, just don't talk to like the neighbors in our nice subdivisions and everything. I was calling on people because I'm really concerned about the 45 grand for a manager for the senior housing, for the senior center, and what did people think of that? And you know, we all want to vote yes for seniors and the schools and everything, because you know they're seniors and they earn it. But you know, the top one is roads.
Yep.
And I throw in sidewalks probably. That's what they want. They want to be able to drive and not, they have a hard time driving and then get lost in a pothole. So, you know, you can listen a lot to some of them. Thanks.
Kathy, I just want to say that like it's that very issue of the things that we've been hearing over the year, whether it's at town meeting or in discussions or, you know, just amongst us in the committee or even the capital planning committee. I know you're on committees. It's these things that for free cash, I mean, there really is no free cash. You know, throwing $50,000, even $90,000 at the roads is a drop in the bucket. There are hundreds and thousands of dollars of requirements to bring the roads in this town up to par or up to expectations. And that's what I don't see. I don't see the revenue coming and going. You know, I've been on this committee, you know, less than many people, but never have we seen the revenue be adequate for the paving plan and the investment that's required to maintain the basics that is in demand. I mean, you know, I've gone to town meeting and I hear the discussion and how adamant or impassioned people are on roads. And so again, I see it both ways. It's a tough one. And the one thing that I won't have on this particular article is a vote without any discussion along these lines. This is perfect discussion.
Exactly.
This is exactly what we should be spending our time on. I appreciate the plea and your inputs. We'll just defer and let's move on this one. Although I want to ask Jim and Katie. I think Joyce has spoken. Doug, or can you guys let us know? Are you ready to vote, or would you be okay with deferring to next week?
Yeah, I'm not ready personally. I'm okay with deferring.
Thanks.
Yeah, I agree. We should defer.
I'm not ready to vote either. So similarly torn, Pete, as you are. I would like to make a plea to the selectman who is a member of the select board who's with us tonight. Just a quick back of the envelope. I know there's a difference in the two properties, this one we're talking about and the quote unquote landlocked Acorn lot. But if that goes through and it is to be considered for sale, keep in mind that the price tag for this Braun property is around $43,000 per acre. And the assessed value, which is I guess the minimum price that the landlocked 3/4 acre or not 0.9 acre lot is, the number for that is about $6,300 per acre. I think that's a big spread. So if the selectmen did decide to sell that Acorn property, I feel that it would be a good idea to try to get a little bit more money than the minimal assessed value. That's a very large spread between those two pieces of property. And I'm sure that the developer that wants to buy the Acorn piece
Right.
would pay a little more than $5,900.
Okay.
And Mr.
Great,
Chair,
thanks.
in closing, can we just, if
Quickly,
the people
quickly.
yes, if the people that have any questions about why they're not, they need more time or they want more information as to the ramifications of anything, you know, I was on the open space back when it was first started, and you can beg for a lot of people to have a committee, Pete, but you got to get them on it. You know, you got to make some calls, I suppose. That's what we all have to do. It's great to advocate for something, but you got to get the bodies. But I've got a lot of information on open space if anybody wants to reach out, pros and cons.
Thanks, Kathy. Okay, we're going to move on to Article 21.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Finance Committee recommend approval of the zoning bylaw amendment performance-based solar ordinance that we just heard about.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that the committee vote to approve Article 21 regarding zoning bylaws or performance-based solar ordinance. Discussion. And I have a question on this one, Doug, maybe. If you look at the article, we've got paragraph 1, and then it goes to paragraph 2. It says add a new subsection XX, 21 9D to section XX 9 density, dimension and density requirements. And then it says 9 period dimension and density requirements. I think I just would like to see that verified, that that's accurate numbering, that it goes from 2 to 9. Or as actually the 9 maybe should be indented and it's part of the actual article text, and paragraph 2 is not. Article 2 is part of the motion. Yeah, I read it that way too. It's a little confusing, but
yeah,
it's semantics, and
usually
that's
use
my only
quotes.
No, two is just sort of the item.
Second item.
right.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
a second item.
part
and
of the
it's
motion.
saying that,
Yeah.
you know,
Part of the
paragraph
article,
9, dimension and density requirements.
Yep.
It's referring to that.
Yeah, maybe in italicized, or I don't know, whatever.
Yeah.
That's fine. Just any further discussion?
Mr. Editor.
Man of many skills.
Sorry.
Pete, I have stuff you can proofread for me anytime.
Oh, thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of recommending Article 21 as written, please say aye.
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 Aye. Those not in favor of recommending, please say nay. And any abstentions? None heard. Okay. Approval, Article 22. Thank you, everybody, for keeping this moving.
I'll recommend approval on it, but I have questions about it. I'm still thinking about that one some. I move recommendation of zoning bylaw amendment, parking dimensions.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to recommend approval of the zoning bylaw amendment for parking dimensions. Discussion.
Mr. Chair, Kathy McGinnis.
Go ahead, Kathy.
I believe that the town is losing off on an opportunity for a board to grant waivers. And when granting waivers can get a linkage of value back to the town, be it sidewalks especially. And for that reason, I recommend that the bylaw stay as is and be granted on a case-by-case basis, because as I'm glad you asked that question, Mr. Chair, that any rehab of existing parking lots would now be able to go with this new bylaw, which for something like Roach Brothers is not a good idea. Thank you.
I just want to clarify, I did not go back into the minutes, and maybe I'm having a moment of a lapse of memory here, but I actually thought that the question that I asked was whether or not, there would be funds that would not be recouped because of this. And I thought actually Doug asked the question as to whether or not this would apply to existing parking lots. It doesn't matter. I just
It does.
want to make sure. Yeah. No, I'm talking about who asked the question. I mean,
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
certainly the issue matters.
I'm just curious about what Kathy, can you give some examples of what could be recouped in terms of, negotiating with, let's leave out existing parking lots, because I think that's a pretty minimal issue, but a new developer, what's the linkage between changing the size, the dimensions of a parking space in a new development?
Obviously a developer asks for waivers, and it's a way to save money when they ask for a waiver that in a cul-de-sac, sidewalks are required around the entire circle. But to save money, the developer asks for parking lots on one side of the subdivision, and that he would donate money to the town sidewalk fund that he would have used to build the other half. And it happens in other non-issues like that. Sometimes when a pipe has to be 4 feet in the ground, he can ask for 3.5 feet, but he'll use a thicker schedule type of pipe because he doesn't want to have to ledge. What do you do? Drill for ledge or blast it? And yeah, you can do that. But then the planning board engineer comes to an amount of money that the developer will save, and the planning board asks that developer to put something in for that. And I gave a good example of the police station has a handicap door. When it was first constructed, it didn't. But we were able to ask that old auto body shop. Remember, there used to be a good salvage yard down there. The company fixed it all up. And the guy said, I'll donate that. And there's just, I was doing it for 23 years, and all of a sudden the board stopped doing that. They were just giving these waivers, but it's the only way. You should see hear what when Brutus was on with me, what Franklin got. Because again, you're saving money for the developer, and they don't care where it goes. If you're half of what they would be spending to conform, well, give that half to the town for money to build on something. And we always used it for sidewalks. And I think there's 40,000 there now, 45,000, I heard last. They could be putting more on it. But, you want to make sure that I don't think something, if we ever get a retail establishment, the type of Roach Brothers again, I think those parking lots are, it's just right as it is. To be able to be making something shorter for the safety. I mean,
okay,
but it's allowing.
I'm gonna interject just because we're getting late, and
I know.
I think so. Any further discussion?
Just so I'm clear, because I've been trying to think about this one too, and a brief question to Kathy, so because she's the expert on the planning board that we have. So if I put in a 30-car lot and I make smaller lots, I could save, as a developer, $10,000, just throwing a number out there. Mm-hmm. The town would then ask for 5,000 of that to go into a fund for sidewalks or roads or something with negotiation, if there was a waiver application, not just a waiver by statute.
Right. But what also allows for the smaller spaces, Mr. Chair, if I might, is that for some restaurants, the parking requirements are based on the number of seating. So if you can fit more parking into a parking lot, then you would be allowed to put more chairs or something into the project. So when they show that, it's like, oh, okay, you can have a more seating in your restaurant. What's that worth? So
okay, Mike Kaczynski, if you would humor me for a minute, this practice of considering of the planning board considering a waiver, and then potentially having an offer made or a donation made to a sidewalk fund or a tree fund. Can you comment on the accuracy of how we've conveyed that practice?
I don't know. I don't quite understand the question.
The question is, are we describing that practice accurately? Is that actually how it happens? Or
I
is
think
there more
so.
to it?
I think that's pretty much it. Certainly Kathy has a lot of experience on the planning board and the history of how that has worked here. And it's not unusual in other communities. They look at it, you have a regulation, a zoning bylaw, and the planning board can look at it on a case-by-case basis. And it's really an agreement with the applicant to make certain allowances based on, the restrictions of the site, but then some benefit is given to the town for really allowing that waiver or that leeway.
Where are those funds held? Are they in a revolving fund account or some other account? I mean, how are they accounted for?
They're in
I
a
believe-
separate fund.
Yeah, we
As
keep
far
a
as the
separate.
sidewalk,
Or
I
trees?
sent that, right, exactly. And the sidewalk information was given to the finance committee on
Yep.
March 17th and also the
Yes.
tree. So
Okay.
it would be in a specific fund.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay. I'm in favor of voting for this, and that's my discussion comment. So all those in favor of approving Article 23,
22.
please say aye.
22.
22.
22, I'm sorry. I lost my track, my space. All those in favor of recommending approval of Article 22, zoning bylaws, parking dimensions, please say aye.
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 All those not in favor of approving Article 22, please say nay. Nay.
Nay.
Nay.
Okay, we'll do a name by name vote. Bear with me, please. Pete B, nay. Craig,
Nay.
Joyce,
Nay.
Kathy,
Nay.
Doug,
Yay.
Jim,
Nay.
Jody,
Yay.
Katie.
That was
Yay.
enthusiastic.
That was,
I'm sorry, Katie. One
yay.
more time. Yay. Okay. Okay, that's 5 nays, 3 yays,
So it's
2.5 yays really, but 3. Okay.
So it doesn't pass.
Thank you. It may pass. It's just that the Finance Committee is going to recommend disapproval, and we certainly can entertain, if we vote in the other policy and procedures, we certainly can vote in or execute a minority report based on the numbers, if that particular document passes. Go ahead.
Yes. Seen as the person presenting the article, I believe, is one of the nay votes, and this a yay vote, and this is a motion to dismiss. Should we reassign that article so he can make a minority report? Should that be the direction we go? Or I just don't know what the procedure is. We've rarely had a person assigned to an article who is opposed to the article.
But I have Doug as voting in favor.
Right. But
Right.
it failed.
Contrary to the recommend, the person presenting the article is voted in contrary to the recommendation of the committee.
Oh, I see what you mean. Okay.
Yeah, I don't want to put him in a position to argue for something he doesn't believe in, but if you're,
I think I had one like that before, actually.
all right. We usually,
We'll take that up for discussion. I'll ponder and we'll discuss it next week. It's just so that we can keep going and finish this up in the next 5 to 10 minutes. But I understand your point, Craig. Thank you.
okay, zoning bylaw, Article
23.
I move that the Finance Committee recommend approval of zoning bylaw amendment, compact car parking.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the committee approve the compact car parking article. Discussion. Discussion.
I think I had less issues with this one than the parking dimensions overall, so.
I would concur with Craig.
Isn't this so similar to the previous? As far as,
They're separate.
I know, but I know it's separate, but, all right. But it's similar.
It's similar, but it sets aside more parking spaces that are for compact cars, which impacts parking, but differently.
But, all right.
It's
But
not
then
an
you-
across the board reduction in the size of the spaces and the number in the lot.
No, and I mean, it'd have to be a pretty decent size lot, right? It's only for over 20 spaces.
Right.
So.
But then you're limiting if you're putting allowing smaller spaces though, then if you've got 19 large cars and one small, or I don't know. I don't see why we're changing sizes.
I've seen this type of parking used a lot in Boston in particular, and in parking garages, and it does allow for more parking spaces. And so if you happen to drive in a compact car, you do have an easier space.
Larger vehicles.
Right. But
I don't see small cars. I see larger vehicles. So I'm kind of thinking we're kind of putting in smaller spaces and eliminating the spaces for the larger cars. We're not Boston. We're not a Boston parking parking lot. Oh. Wow.
But it can allow you to have more parking spaces overall.
I do like the fact that, well, not necessarily, because if you read paragraph G, it does say that for the reduction in total parking area by increasing the number of compact spots, that they do have to provide for equal open space.
And Mr. Chair, my Kathy here. My only concern with that is that they're not describing the open space. Is it true open space where there could be a picnic table or something, or is it swampy open space? Define open space. And I brought that up at one of the meetings. It's for you, I wasn't even going to mention it, and then you mentioned number G, and it was thank you.
I frankly, I'm going to vote for this. I'm going to vote yay for this, and I'm not going to necessarily micromanage. They know what they're doing, and it's up to them to execute what their policy is in terms of waivers or adherence to the bylaw. So I'm in favor of it. It says up front what the intent is, and it's to decrease the amount of impermeable space. Where across the board you see more and more small vehicles, electric vehicles. Not that this applies to electric vehicles, but electric vehicles are generally smaller. I don't have a problem with this. I think this is consistent with the trend of where we're going. We had a lengthy discussion in one of the capital planning committee meetings on electric vehicles and how to provide for if a town or a department goes to electric vehicles, how those charging stations are provided, and getting out in front of that to include those provision of the electrical charging in future designs or future construction. I mean, that's just where we're headed. So I think this is consistent with that, and so I'm going to vote yay on it.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of recommending approval of Article 23, the zoning bylaw amendment for compact car parking, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those not in favor of approval, please say nay.
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 Okay, we'll go through. I think I heard just Jim and Joyce, or I'm guessing I heard Jim and Joyce, but I'm just going to go through it quickly. Pete is a yay. Craig?
Yay.
Joyce?
Nay.
Kathy?
Yes.
Doug?
Yeah.
Jim?
Nay.
Jody?
Yay.
Katie?
Yay.
Okay, my ears didn't deceive me. Thank you, everybody. Okay, couple more, please, if we can just keep us on track, because I know it's
24,
late.
Zoning bylaw amendment, cannabis delivery. You don't have to tell me twice. Okay. I move the committee recommend approval of this article.
Second.
It's been recommended, it's been motioned and approved, motion and seconded for the committee to recommend approval of Article 24, which is the zoning bylaw for cannabis delivery. Discussion.
I think it's one of those situations where if you don't have a bylaw, you can get in trouble. It's now legal in the town to do it, evidently, because of the way the law has been crafted. So I think we do need a bylaw to get on top of it. We've been down this road before with many other bylaws that nobody wanted to put in, but if we didn't have them, we left a hole in our ability to enforce the law.
And a moratorium only just buys you some time. You're going to have a bylaw eventually.
Yeah.
So
I move to approve this article or second the approval of this article.
There you
go. Doug, this is your article, right?
Mm-hmm.
Doug, can you explain to me what does lack of the article do? Would it allow for delivery yet with no control on where they base themselves out of? In other words, I'm not sure what the article provides. We've just said, hey, this is happening one way or the other. Is it just allow us to say where they can go and what they have to do when they're allowed to go there?
Yeah, it's the same thing. It's the same issue we had when we set the bylaw up for the, recreational marijuana.
Specific to zoning.
Where we can control where they could operate out of and various other aspects. If we don't have a bylaw, then they can do whatever they want.
They can go anywhere. Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. And the only thing I'll say is that to me, this is kind of like this is borderline bait and switch by the state where, we had a 3-to-1 ratio on, alcohol establishments to marijuana retailers. And here we go. Now there's we're going to allow delivery service, but one of those services that's a delivery service actually is a retailer. And I don't think that that's right. I don't think anybody perceived that or conceived that that was where it was headed when they approved retail establishments. That, okay, retail means one thing. Now you've got delivery people that are just packaging and, we've got the BJ's Wholesale Club down on 109. And now we've got people that can go buy, package, and resell, which is, I don't like that. So,
Pete, Pete, I have to agree with you, having been on that committee and having voted and helped with the bylaws. But I do think that I agree that it is a bait and switch. However, if we don't have some form of bylaw, I just wouldn't want to. That's why I was asking so many questions earlier. I just don't want a free for all. And if it is going to be governed by the state and has to go through all the same kinds of rigorous protection, the police and security and all that, I think we're better off doing it.
Yeah, my criticism is not to the article or to the bylaw. It has to happen. So I'm in favor of it. Any more comments?
The original ballot question in Massachusetts on medical marijuana, legalizing medical marijuana, was exactly what some people, I won't mention any names like myself, said that it would be, which is effectively a stepping stone or a Trojan horse to everything else that's come after that. And that's where we are. And at least the state is giving municipalities some ability to regulate those businesses. So we ought to do it.
Yep.
Agreed.
There's your statement for town meeting.
Any further discussion? Okay. All those in favor of recommending approval of Article 24, the zoning bylaw amendment for cannabis delivery, say aye.
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 Those not in favor of recommending approval, say nay. Any abstentions? Okay, approved unanimously. 25.
I move that the company sleeping there for a minute. I move that the town, I move that the Finance Committee recommend approval of the Article 25 to allow the town bylaw addition a waiver of town building project permit fees. To allow the waiver of town building project permit fees. Yeah, just reading that again because I butchered it the first time through.
Just glad I'm not the only one.
No, I got to get on the big screen now. I can't read on the little screen anymore.
Can I get a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to recommend that the Finance Committee approve or recommend for approval Article 25, the waiver of municipal inspection fees related to inspections of municipal and school projects. Discussion. None heard. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those not recommending approval, please say nay. Any abstentions? Okay, Article 26.
I move that the Finance Committee recommend the authorizing the sale of the town-owned land on Acorn Street.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to recommend approval of Article 26, sale by auction of sealed bids of property on Acorn Street. Discussion.
I think my only discussion is I'd like to see a fair price for it, and I hope the select board can put together a minimum acceptable bid amount that is, as Doug pointed out, somewhat equitable.
Yeah, I would also like to point out that by selling it, it would presumably be added to the tax rolls and would become a taxable parcel.
Some level, yeah.
Yep.
I think I don't know, I think a price needs to be a reasonable, Doug brought out a really good point. I mean, it's assessed at 6,000, whereas the other land is assessed at 43,000. I think that if we're going, I don't know that we can put any stipulations, but I just don't see, I have a problem selling it, saying that we approve of it if it could in fact be sold for 6,000.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of recommending approval for Article 26, the authorization of sale of town land on Acorn Street, please say aye.
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 Aye. All those not in favor of recommending the article, please say nay.
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 Okay, by name. Pete, yay. Craig.
Yay.
Joyce.
Nay.
Thank you. Kathy.
You're welcome.
Nay.
Doug.
Yay.
Jim.
Nay.
Jody.
Yay.
Katie.
Yay.
I have the tally as 1, 2,
It's 5-3.
5 yeas, 3 nays. And that was 26. Okay.
All right. Article 27. Move that the town recommend, the Finance Committee recommend approval of the pilot agreement for the Clyde Brown Solar Array.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the Finance Committee recommend approval of Article 27, pilot agreement for the Clyde F. Brown Solar Project. Discussion. None heard. All those in favor of recommending approval say yay.
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 Those not in favor of approval, please say nay. Any abstentions? Okay, it's 20, on to 28.
I move that the Finance Committee recommend recommend approval of the Medicare Medicaid reimbursement services for $5,000 from free cash.
I second that.
It's been moved and seconded that we recommend approval to transfer or appropriate $5,000 for Medicare Medicaid reimbursement services from free cash. Discussion. None heard. All those in favor of Article 28, please say yay.
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 Those not in favor of recommending the article, please say nay.
Yay. Oh, sorry.
Don't be funny. Okay, that was a yay, right? Correct, Craig? Yay.
I voted yes. There's
Okay.
nobody
Okay.
that who
All right, any abstentions? None heard. Article 29.
I move that the Finance Committee recommend funding the unemployment insurance fund for $7,700.
I second that.
It's been moved and seconded that the Finance Committee recommend approval of Article 29, $7,700 for, excuse me, Article 29. Let me hold on for 1 second. Mike, are we not recommending approval on this one? Article 29?
No, I think that's probably fine to move ahead with.
Okay, the 7,700 is highlighted on my document.
It's
That's
highlighted
okay.
only because it was a recent change, but I don't
Okay.
expect any change on it.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so it's been moved and seconded to vote to recommend approval of Article 29, $7,700 for unemployment insurance fund. Although discussion. None heard. All those in favor of recommending approval, say yay.
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 Those against, say nay. Any abstentions? Carol, a funding source for Article 29?
It's free cash.
Thank you.
Mr.
Okay,
Chairman,
Article 30.
I would like to defer on those until we finish voting the budget, because again, it's one of those places where extra funds could go if we have any extra funds.
Yep, 30 and 31, right?
30 and 31, yeah.
Okay.
And I think there'll be quick votes next week if once we're done with the budget, one way or the other.
Okay. I'm gonna, unless there are any hugely strenuous objections, I'm gonna defer the vote on policies and procedure. I'm not gonna take any more comments on them in terms of the document. The document, as we've reviewed and people have given comments, is on the website. We'll vote on it next week, but we're not gonna make any more changes to it between now and then. And unless there's any, we can discuss it on if there's some strenuous objections to that. I just don't want, I want to give you some of your time back. I don't want to go over 10 o'clock. Okay. I want people to know, I think we're on the, let me get back to my agenda. I think we're up to the old business, new business. I want people to know that there's a document that has been provided to the committee or will be provided to the committee and posted to the website for next week's meeting. And it's on the enterprise committee and some basically a report back on their proceedings. The document will be posted and it will be discussed next week and added to the agenda. So I just want to make sure everybody's aware of that. And Kathy, if you have anything to add to that, please feel free right now.
Mr. Chair, thanks. A couple of seconds. I'd like to just inform the Finance Committee, you'll hear more about it next week, that consultant that was hired by the Board of Selectmen prepared a report and came to the conclusion after a lot of research and hours spent outlining the jobs that the various DPW employees perform, that the water, sewer, and stormwater enterprise funds have spent this year $378,000 to non-enterprise jobs and direct and indirect costs. So misappropriated. The state statute says, Mr. Chair, that funds that are in the enterprises can only be used for direct or indirect costs by the enterprise. And the consultant has determined that $378,000 of said funds are not being used for enterprise. So that's what will be presented next week. And perhaps we might even have the consultant show up, Mr. Chair, so that if there's any questions that are over and above what Craig and I, Craig is on the committee with me, can answer. Thanks a lot for giving me the opportunity to speak to it.
Okay, and Kathy, you know, I haven't gone through the full agenda next week. Obviously, we have some items to vote and discuss. I hope 15 minutes will be sufficient. You know, you can send me a note or something offline if you think it is, or you need more time. Just please let me know, because I don't want to go to 10 o'clock next week, and I know none of you do either. So, but I don't foresee that happening. But we do have to have our final recommendations complete.
Well, I think, Mr. Chair, what should be known is that the Finance Committee wants to approve misappropriated funds, and that's what it comes down to. And it would be the entire operating budget in essence. So, you know, this is dire consequences for a lot of people. I mean, the enterprise fund has done research. We've reached out to attorneys, the DOR, and the ramifications, which unfortunately the chairman of the select board did not want to bring before his board. So I just don't, what happens if the FinCom approves something that isn't right? I mean, you know, Mike isn't in a position to answer this either. You know, I'm just, you know, hopefully 15 minutes if everybody reads, and maybe if they have questions ahead of time or something, but, you know,
okay,
it's unfortunate.
Yeah, and Mr. Chairman, the only thing I'd add is I put that on prior to the budget stuff. So we start with that and then move into budget voting, because it does pertain to budgets.
Okay, all right.
Mr. Chairman, I know, if I may.
Hold on one second, Mike. Joyce, please.
Yeah, I'm glad Kathy brought that up. If it's on the preliminary data, it's on the enterprise fund direct and indirect costs. If anybody wants to take a look at it, it's item number 14 through 23. So
Thank
that you'd be able to be prepared for it for next week.
Thank you. That's why we'll be posting it, and everybody will have a chance to look at it ahead of time, and ask that you spend the time to do that. Mr. Kaczynski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I agree it's a worthwhile discussion. I just want to note a couple items, and the first is that the numbers cited, they're still being worked on. They're not final numbers yet. Mr. Valente from the Community Paradigm, who's working with us, is still working with us to finalize those numbers. We do expect that variance to come down somewhat. However, having said that, I do agree that the report shows, or the preliminary data shows, that we are, you know, we are somewhat out of balance. So certainly, you know, we're looking, and the select board has been discussing the best methodology to make adjustments and a transition plan to do that. So I think it is a worthwhile discussion. And I know the board has had some discussion with Mr. Valente, and we'll certainly have some more as we move forward in budget deliberation. So that's all I have for tonight. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'm going to move us to the meeting minutes for March 17th. And I'll take a motion.
I vote that we approve the minutes of March 17th.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the meeting minutes for March 17th be approved as written. Discussion. None heard. All those in favor say aye.
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 And ask your attention for the meeting minutes of March 24th.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, Jody.
I move that we approve the meeting minutes of March 24th as written.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the meeting minutes for the March 24th meeting. I see us all in attendance with the exception of Jim. All those, any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 And with one abstention, correct, Jim?
Correct.
Deirdre, you all set with that? Okay, I really appreciate everybody's attentiveness and perseverance. And I'll take a motion.
I move that we adjourn.
I second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Thank you, everybody. Good night, and we'll see you
Night.
next week.
Thank
Thank
you.
Good night.
Thank you. Thank you, Deirdre.
You're welcome.